Half a day, everyone. Thank you for joining us. You are tuning in to the Coalition's 2021 No More webinar, and we are focusing on human trafficking awareness and response. It's nice to see that many of you are on, and oh, you're even early. And we are here at 5 to the hour, and we hope that we'll have more sign in so we can start on time. We have a really full packed schedule for you today, so we thank you so much for joining us. And just as a reminder, just wanted to point out that we are doing this as Zoom webinar. So all of you who are joining us as participants, you're automatically muted and your cameras are turned off. Just wanted to make sure that you're ready for a full 2.5 hours of our presentation this morning. So while we have a few more minutes left, go grab yourself your favorite beverage. And you can also begin practicing your fingers and find our chat, introduce yourselves so our partners will know who you are and who's in the house. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us again. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, we have the chat as well as the Q&A also. So please use those too. So I'm Cynthia with the Guam Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Family Violence. For those of you who are just tuning in, thank you so much. Just a reminder, if you know of anyone who's trying to log in, I know we say email us, but while I'm on getting this started, it's going to be difficult for me to check the emails. So best to call the office 479-2277 for a faster response to any access issues. And hopefully we'll be able to run smoothly throughout the day without any tech issues. So we want to, of course, thank all of our partners who are standing by, ready to provide information and share with you more on human trafficking awareness and response. And welcome to all. Just wanted to start out, we have Catholic Social Service in the house. We have our partners from Pohnpei. Thank you for joining us. Yes, we have from our coalition members as well, St. Anthony Church. We have also our folks from Department of Youth Affairs, so thank you. So meanwhile, if you have any questions, Q&A or the chat. If I'm not able to get to it, or if our presenters are not able to get to our questions, I've got Polly, Ron, Taylor, and Dwayne responding to those in the chat also, so at least we'll be able to get back to you or respond to you in no time. Okay, it's great to see all of you joining us. Thank you for commenting in the chat. We appreciate your joining us for, this is day 3 of day 4. So as we get started again, just wanted to point out you are attending our Human Trafficking Awareness and Response webinar. We are at the top of the hour, so thank you for joining us. I'm Cynthia Cabot again, Director for the Guam Coalition Against Sexual Assaults and Family Violence. So just wanted to point out though, and start with, if not for our funding support, from the Office on Violence Against Women, as well as the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services with the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act, we would not have been able to provide this webinar for you. And thanks to our federal partners, and you will be meeting them shortly this morning. Wanted to point out that if you are interested in downloading all of the handouts and the materials, as well as the PowerPoint handouts that our presenters will be providing, go to the website, www.guamcoalition.org. Username is awareness, and the password is case sensitive, so capital H, capital T, and capital A 2021. We are fortunate that the University of Guam will be able to bestow one CEU, or continuing education unit. For those of you who are interested, you need to email them directly, pip@triton.uog.edu. This is the subject. And of course, the materials or the handouts and forms to file for your CEUs are available on our website as well. So here's our wonderful agenda, really full and packed. It's so full that we didn't find time to be able to put in a break. So we just want to advise you, manage your self-care, and in between, as we are able to, we will be able to do that. So we have our welcome with Polly Mike Crisostomo, our opening remarks with Director Catherine Chan, and then we have our federal agency partners and our local agency partners providing more information on services and TA resources. Just want to remind you, please, your evaluation and survey input is very important to us. That is also available on our website. Log in again is the information there, or if you have any questions, email us at info@guamcoalition.org. So we want to thank you for joining us today, and of course to our partners who are on waiting in the sidelines. We want to remind you that tomorrow is our day 4 of our 4-day series. And again, 9 a.m. check-in, and email us if you have any issues with registration, and if there's any other resources that we can provide you with. So again, our agenda for today. And so at this time, I'd like to call on Polly Mike Crisostomo to please do our welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Edie. And once again, welcome to all of you, to our panelists and our attendees. On behalf of the Guam Coalition and Sexual Assault and Family Violence, we thank you again for attending this coalition's No More webinar on human trafficking awareness and response. The coalition last week joined many of you as our island's leaders as well in recognizing January's National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. We want to acknowledge Attorney General Levin Camacho that opened this webinar as the leader of Guam's Human Trafficking Task Force. This webinar training focuses on the law enforcement and prosecution response, and even feature the task force Stop the Evil campaign. We also heard from Attorney Eric O'Malley with the U.S. Attorney's Office for Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands on investigating a trafficking operation and a review of the federal and Guam anti-trafficking laws. Attorney O'Malley reminded us of the federal campaign to look beneath the surface and the approach to being victim-centered. And although trafficking in persons has historically occurred for thousands of years, the U.S. Congress only enacted the first legislation with the Trafficking Victims Protection Act in 2000. However, reported cases of labor trafficking or sex trafficking are very low on Guam, but the reality is that many more cases go unreported. This may be because one may not realize that they are victims of sex or labor trafficking. or they may not know who to trust or ask for help. Too often, many of us realize that we think that only adults are victims of sex trafficking and labor trafficking, but our children, our youth are victims as well. Today's webinar will highlight training, technical assistance, and other resources available from our federal partners. We also feature a few of the services and resources from the region. And tomorrow's webinar, day 4, will address what human trafficking looks like in our region. As pastor of St. Anthony's Church, I recognize that this is an opportune time for all of us, including faith-based organizations, to learn more about human trafficking and how we can all be part of the community response and prevent this from happening in our villages and our region. To other faith-based organizations, know your neighbors in your villages, the massage parlors, the bars, the barracks. Look beneath the surface. Be that community champion that a human trafficking victim can learn to trust and be the gateway to other services. Be an advocate. So let us be mindful that the evil is not the victim of human trafficking, but understand that circumstances through force, fraud, or coercion, one is preyed upon the perpetrators of human trafficking. Let us once again continue to work together to prevent human trafficking in our communities. The work continues throughout the year, not just this month in January. I'd like to go ahead and introduce to you our presenter, Director Catherine Chun. Catherine Chun is the Director of the Office on Trafficking in Persons, OTIP, at the Department of Health and Human Services, DHSS, Administration for Children and Families, and is primarily responsible for implementing the DHHS anti-trafficking authorities under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, the TVPA, in coordination with other divisions and federal partners. Director Chan has served as a senior advisor on human trafficking at the department for nearly 8 years now, and prior to that was co-founder of Polaris Project, working directly with survivors and building community capacity to effectively respond to human trafficking. Let us warmly welcome and give a great Hafa to Director Chan.
Hafa, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. And Cynthia, thank you so much for your invitation to join today's session. My goal this morning is to explain a little bit about what we've been doing here in Washington, D.C. To help integrate the public health response to the violence of human trafficking. Last week, I heard that you heard that there are many great partners across the country, speaking from the law enforcement perspective and the importance of criminal justice involvement in prosecuting cases of trafficking and having a victim-centered approach to working with survivors of human trafficking. But here at the Department of Health and Human Services, we really look at violence prevention from a comprehensive lens of public health. So what that means for us is that we recognize that human trafficking doesn't occur in a vacuum. Many of you are already familiar with the communities in your local areas that are at highest risk for human trafficking, whether it's young people disconnected from their families because they're either kicked out of their homes or running away from situations of abuse or violence, survivors who may have experienced other forms of abuse prior to trafficking or maybe after trafficking, including intimate partner violence and sexual assault. And also recognizing that human trafficking is often multi-generational, and there are many historical legacies that may create heightened risk factors for human trafficking. And so within the Department of Health and Human Services, our office specifically focuses on directly addressing the problem and crime and the public health issue of forced labor and commercial sexual exploitation that makes up human trafficking. But we work a lot through partnerships across the federal government. Partnerships at the local, tribal, state levels are really important for us as well. Because we recognize we can't do it alone, and working with organizations addressing many other systemic issues would also be helpful for survivors of trafficking and communities at highest risk. Um, the second part of a public health response to addressing human trafficking is uh, empowering, obviously, local community leaders, um, uh, whether it's through faith-based organizations or grassroots advocacy organizations. But a lot, we've been making a concerted effort over the last few years to empower survivors of human trafficking through leadership development programs, through funded training and technical assistance that you'll hear about shortly, integrating survivor perspectives and voices into informing policy and programming at the federal level. There is a official U.S. advisory council on human trafficking comprised of survivors of trafficking and many other advisory councils where survivors have a direct seat at the table. Um, and most recently, we're very proud of our 5th cohort of the Human Trafficking Leadership Academy, which is an effort on our part to bring together 6 survivor leaders with 6 allied service providers to address key policy questions that we've been asking ourselves at the federal level. And in the 5th class of this Human Trafficking Leadership Academy, it was our first national class of survivors and allied service providers representing Indigenous communities, including Native Pacific Islanders. And each of these classes, they end with a set of recommendations addressing a key policy question. And in this case, the question was how to, what cultural factors could be implemented and integrated into programming to strengthen prevention for trafficking, particularly among youth. And their recommendations are out on our website. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. But those are just some examples of bringing survivor voices to the table at the national level and locally as well. The next thing I wanted to mention about a public health response is we are a community of scientists who care very much about making progress on issues of violence prevention. And so what our office has done in partnership with researchers and our other federal agencies is to create more opportunities to collect data about human trafficking, because without data, without knowing who within our communities are impacted, and also without evaluation of the programs assisting survivors of human trafficking, we're not sure what's working. And we want to be moving towards a place where we're using evidence and theories to implement anti-trafficking programming. And so these days you may see human trafficking data elements integrated into runaway homeless youth data systems, intimate partner data systems, into health diagnostic codes and ICD-10 codes for any healthcare providers who may be on the call. And all this means that there is a great opportunity for students, if you are a student engaged on this call today, to work with your local service providers, local research institutions, or federal agencies to help research some of these key policy questions and analyze some of the data that is increasingly becoming available on human trafficking. The next thing I wanted to mention is we've been trying a lot to decrease the burden for survivors of trafficking and their families from seeking help on human trafficking. Many of you may be familiar. We fund a national human trafficking hotline that is available 24/7. You can call it, you can text it, you can online chat and email. And there's a national referral directory to connect survivors of trafficking or people seeking assistance on their behalf with whichever service needs that they may have. And so if you're a local service provider and you want to get plugged in and make sure that you're part of that referral directory, please reach out to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And if you are a community organization that is conducting outreach, please let the members of your community know that this hotline exists as a resource in addition to many of the other federal resources you'll learn about today. And then finally, primary prevention. Most of our funding at the federal level here at the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Department of Justice, goes towards providing funding for case management and other services supporting survivors of human trafficking and other forms of violence. Um, but this is one area where we need to rely on partnerships to get to prevention. And so this past year, we were really excited to announce the first national prevention education program to get content into schools and youth programs um, to not only educate school administrators and teachers, but also students themselves in age appropriate ways to understand the common grooming and recruitment patterns used by trafficking, to develop the skills to seek help if they end up in some type of troubling situation, and also to develop their resiliency prior to, during, or after experiencing trafficking or a related form of violence. And we look forward to sharing the results of evaluating those prevention education programs in the coming years. But when we speak of primary prevention, we're also talking about preventing the perpetration of the crime of human trafficking, not just preventing the victimization. And there is a federal interagency working group addressing demand reduction, demand for both forced labor and labor trafficking, as well as for commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. And this is a group that just got kicked off, and we look forward to having stakeholders inform some of these federal interagency efforts on preventing the perpetration of human trafficking. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from similar fields, including the IPV field around preventing the perpetration of violence and abuse. So that is just some of the things to that we're looking ahead to, and hopefully you feel that there is an open door here in Washington, D.C., and we look forward to being in touch with you over the course of the coming year and learning with you for the rest of today's webinar session. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Director Catherine Chand, for sharing your information, especially of the resources that we'll be able to avail and build our own capacity here on island. So thank you for your continued support. Just wanted to share that Director Catherine Chand was able to join us as well at our Pacific Region Summit 2 years ago. So we continue to look at opportunities to have her participate and across the mile. So we thank you for joining us in our time zone. And I know the last time you joined us was also via Zoom. So it seems like, you know, we really need to provide an opportunity for you to come to our shores and be able to join us here as well. But we want to thank to the Office on Trafficking in Persons, who also provide opportunities through training and technical assistance with other TA providers. And we have them standing by as well, and they'll be presenting this morning for us as well. So just wanted to remind you, if you have any questions, post that in the chat or in the Q&A. I hope that Catherine Chand will be able to join us and stand by should there be any other questions while we also hear from our other partners. So on that note, thank you to Catherine Chand. And I just wanted to thank also our board chair, Polly Microsostomo, for doing the opening remarks as well, our welcome. It's great to have key partners on board for the coalition. We are only as great as our partners are, right? So thank you. And again, the chat and the question and answers are there for you if you have any questions. So just wanted to point out, as Polly Mike noted, that oftentimes we think of sex trafficking and labor trafficking as primarily impacting our adults. So first this morning, we wanted to call on our partners from NCMEC, or the National Center on Missing and Exploited Children, to be able to join us here this morning. And I will have you ready on board and provide you the opportunity as well to join us. And I just wanted to introduce Eliza Riak and Tina Bigdelli, and they'll give you a brief background on their work and the support and services that they'll be able to share with us this morning. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm going to go ahead and share our screen. And Tina, I confirm that we have a few extra, or another panelist confirmed. So if we can try to make sure we keep a lot of information, run through it as quickly as possible. So my name is Eliza Riak. I am the strategic advisor on child sex trafficking at NCMEC, and I've been with the organization now for over 4 years. And I'm going to go ahead and share our presentation screen while Tina introduces herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Tina Bigdelli, and I'm a senior outreach manager with the National Center. And I've been with the organization for over 3 years now. All right, great. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then I'm going to pass the mic to Eliza a little bit further in. We are just going to give you a little bit of background about who we are and what we do. Eliza, go to the next slide. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is a nonprofit organization. We serve children, families. We work with our law enforcement partners, our community partners, and our mission is to find missing children, reduce sexual exploitation, and prevent further victimization. And so we're probably most widely known for our work around missing child cases. So when a child goes missing, so anyone under the age of 18 and under special circumstances, young adults 18 to 20, their legal guardian can report them missing to us, or the law enforcement agency handling that case will report them missing to us. And then what we do is we serve as, we kind of liaise between the family, the guardian, and the agency handling the case. We provide resources, support, we help with poster distribution, and then we provide case resources to the law enforcement agency working on this case, trying to recover that child. That was really how we were founded and part of our origin story at NCMEC. And then in 1998, we started our cyber tip line program. And that's when we started working on child sexual exploitation cases. So we also operate the National Cyber Tip Line, where any cases of online exploitation can be reported to us that way, including child sex trafficking. So the vast majority of reports we receive are of child sexual abuse materials. We have a wide range of programs. We're not going to obviously be able to touch on every single one. We're going to be really focusing on our resources around child sex trafficking, which is a very unique program that we have at NCMEC. It's really a hybrid team of case managers from our missing children side, and then analysts from our child sexual exploitation side, who work together to provide very unique and specialized support on these cases, to both on the families, the provider side, and then also to the law enforcement agencies working on these cases. Next slide, please. So I always like to start off by plugging our hotline. This is really the gateway to NCMEC. This is how anyone can contact us. This is how reports are made to us of missing children. Reports of exploitation can be made this way. This is how anyone can call and ask for resources. They can report a tip. We really serve as a national resource center and clearinghouse for information. So when a child goes missing, this is where we gather all those tips and then share them out with the agency handling the case. But I always say that if you lose our contact information, you can call the hotline. You'll be connected with Eliza or myself or anyone else on our teams. But this really is the way to contact us, either to report something or to ask for information. Next slide. So we are here, we're going to be focusing our presentation on specifically on child sex trafficking. And NCMEC follows the federal definition for in the federal law when it comes to child sex trafficking, which is basically that anyone who is 17 years old or younger who is engaging in commercial sex, so whether that's related to advertising, solicitation, exploitation through commercial sex, then they are recognized by the federal law as a victim of child sex trafficking. And, oh, I can control this. Sorry, y'all. And I also always want to define what commercial sex is as well, so that everybody's kind of on the same page. So commercial sex is basically just the exchange of something of value for some type of sex act. Most people, when they think of child sex trafficking, the first thing that comes to mind is that exchange of money, but it doesn't only have to be money. It can be a place to stay, it can be food, it can be protection. It's just something that has value that is being exchanged. And what's also really important to understand is that there is no consent that is necessary in this, because a minor, a child, cannot legally consent to engage in commercial sex. So there's no movement that is necessary. Somebody can be trafficked from city to city, country to country, but they can also be trafficked within their own hometown, within their own home. And it doesn't matter whether or not the young person consented or agreed to participate, because they cannot legally consent to engage in this. Eliza, I know you said I have control, but I can't figure out how to take that control. Okay, thank you. When we talk about child sex trafficking, we're really intentional about the language that we use to talk about these cases. I would say when I first started doing this work about 10 years ago, the language that was still being used was child prostitute. And we've really come a long way since then, because we know that that language is harmful to victims of child sex trafficking. And we're really intentional about referring to them as child sex trafficking victims. Or if you are interacting, if I'm interacting with somebody who's a victim of child sex trafficking, I actually avoid the label altogether. I just call them by their name. That's really the easiest way to go about it. But when we're talking about this issue, we want to make sure that we're using language that's victim-centered, that's trauma-informed. We're recognizing that this is a young person who cannot legally consent, who legally does not have a choice in what's happening to them. And they are in this situation for a variety of reasons, and that there are people who are taking advantage of them in their situation. So the language that we use is very, very important. I used to do a lot of work with young people around child sex trafficking and around prevention. And we used to talk a lot about language, and it was really interesting to see their shift when we would compare kind of what comes to mind when we use the term prostitute versus what comes to mind when we use the term victim. And it was almost like a light bulb going off, because we do this every day. It's a part of our language. Sometimes we're using language naturally that is very victim blaming. And once we're conscious of it, then we can start to shift that, because that's really, really important for these young people, for these survivors of this sexual violence, to be able to know that we are in their corner and we're here to support them and to provide them the services that they need. We don't want them to feel like we are continuing to exploit them or continuing to hurt them like their trafficker did. So I mentioned earlier that children can be trafficked. There doesn't need to be any kind of movement that's necessary, and they can be trafficked even without leaving their own homes. That means that a trafficker can literally be anybody, including their parent, guardian, or family member. So this type of trafficking, what's often referred to as familial trafficking, is a little bit more challenging to identify, because the child is typically still in their home environment. But I always want to highlight that this is something that does continue to happen, because it doesn't gain the same level of attention as other forms of trafficking, where there's maybe a pimp involved or a gang involved. But trafficking can happen to a child without them ever leaving the home. And this is kind of just to make this connection between all of the issues that NCMEC works on. So we National Center for Missing and Exploited Children really start off as an organization, as a resource center and clearinghouse for cases involving children who go missing. And we know, in the vast majority of cases that NCMEC sees, I would say in 2020, over 93% of the cases that we received of missing children were children who were missing because they had run away from home. So they had left whatever their, their home environment is, whether it's with biological family member or whether it's a placement through child welfare services, but they had left that placement, and that's why they were missing. And we know that when children go missing, when they're running away, they're either running from something or they're running to something. So they're running away from a harmful situation, or somebody has offered them a better situation that is more appealing to them that can also be harmful that they're running to. So we have to always recognize that. And we know that when children are running away frequently and for long periods of time, they are at even greater risk. So if you click one more time. Based on our reports last year, of the children who reported missing to us because they had run away, we estimate that 1 in 6 of them were likely victims of child sex trafficking. So in total, we had over 26,500 reports of children who had run away last year, and 1 in 6 were likely victims of child sex trafficking. That's a really big number. And so one of the reasons I always bring this up is we often, when we hear this doesn't happen here, this doesn't happen in my community, we may only be thinking of what we can see and not thinking about the behaviors so we may not be seeing the commercial sex act exchange, but we might be seeing other behaviors. And one of those behaviors is that running away. And so that might be that first sign that something is going on with that young person. Next slide. So here's just some of our data over the from last year. If you could just click through maybe 2 more times, Eliza. Yeah. So I mentioned the 1 in 6 statistic. I'm so sorry about that. The 1 in 6 statistic. We also found that 17% of the children that were reported missing to us last year were running, and they were missing from the care of social services. So we call those children missing from care. In total, we received over 17,000 reports of possible child sex trafficking. So that includes children that were reported missing, but also children that were reported through, or cases of child sex trafficking that were reported through our cyber tip line. Every case that comes into us as a missing child case is screened for child sex trafficking. So that's often sometimes how we catch those cases. We've responded to cases across the country, and we've also found that a common misconception is that this doesn't happen to boys or male identifying victims, but just last year, 7% of our cases were of victims who identified as male. Now, this is a low number, and we recognize that there's a lot of underreporting of male victims of trafficking, just like there is underreporting of male victims of sexual violence. And that's for a wide range of reasons, including the stigma and really lack of understanding around this can happen to boys as well.
And Tina, I'm really glad you brought that up. Just as an addition to the boys piece, it's worth saying that while we don't have clear numbers, our data really reflects on the data reported to us. Mm-hmm. So it's important to think through not just what our data is saying about the trends and where we can create or look for trends and reliable patterns, but at the same time to know that just because there are lots of children who may not be reported missing to NCMEC. So kids that are kicked out of their home because of their gender identity or sexual orientation, or because they said, hey, mom, stepdad's abusing me. And she said, I don't believe you, get out of the house. And those are cases that aren't going to necessarily be on our caseload. And certainly we face that similar challenge with data with familial trafficking. So when we talk about the boys number, I think that caveat is also really, really important to mention with these statistics. But it's also important to say that this number has gone up from historically just a fraction of a percent of our data related to gender. So from a fraction of a percent to 7%. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we're actually recognizing that this happens to boys as well and taking the time to ask those questions. And again, those, like Tina mentioned, those numbers are specifically for males assigned or boys assigned male at birth. We're hoping to really update our numbers to be more reflective of transgender youth as we can think through ways to make sure that the information that is getting reported to us can accurately reflect that information.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eliza. I also actually should mention that Eliza touched on this, that the data that we have is only as good as what's reported to us, and we only get a fraction of the reports of missing child cases, and I can tell you for sure of missing child cases. And I'm sure, exploitation is also underreported and child sex trafficking is underreported. I think in 2019, there was like 424,000, something around that, reports of missing children that were entered into the National Crime Database. And we got less than 30,000 of those reports. So it's important to recognize that we're only getting a fraction. That's part of the reason why we do a lot of this outreach, is because we want those reports to be coming in so we can capture that information better and we can provide services to more children and families. And this also is to just touch on the misconception that trafficking only happens in certain places or in certain communities. It truly happens everywhere. And often in those communities where we feel like it definitely doesn't happen, it's just a little bit maybe more hidden, or once we start looking for the signs and the indicators, it suddenly is very much in our faces and you can't turn away from it. So it happens in every single type of community, and whether it's your city or suburb, but every community, including Indigenous and tribal communities. And really, trafficking didn't stop during the pandemic. So now, children are at home more, they're interacting less in person with others. And what we've seen is that trafficking is still continuing to happen. This exploitation of children is continuing to happen, and traffickers have just shifted, and exploiters have shifted their methods of exploitation. We're still right now really analyzing a lot of the data that we've had come in over the last year. But we are seeing definitely a shift, and it's continuing, and numbers are continuing to increase. So now I'm going to talk about the risk factors. And what we've done at NCMEC is we've kind of split them up into 3 categories. So societal, familial, and then also kind of on an individual level. So starting off with societal risk factors. Anything that's going to marginalize a community, marginalize an individual, is going to be a huge risk factor. So we know that racism, both on a systemic level, institutional level, is a huge risk factor. Any kind of bullying, harassment, when a person doesn't have access to resources, that increases their risk and their vulnerability to a trafficker to exploit them. We've seen throughout our work pretty consistently that any kind of involvement in the child welfare or juvenile justice system significantly increases the child's risk. There's a lot of trauma that's involved in that. If they live in a community where there's a lot of gang activity, that puts them at really high risk. And then, of course, sexism, xenophobia, again, that marginalization of individuals. And then also on another societal level, this kind of cultural acceptance that we have of commercial sex and the sexualization of children, and the minimization of what an exploiter is truly doing and how that's kind of glorified in a lot of ways. And so that definitely plays a really, really big part because it normalizes these experiences for young people. Next slide. So on a family level, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, that where an individual is assigned a score based on the number of adverse childhood experiences that they've experienced, and the higher that number, the increased risk they have for health disparities later in life, and we know that that also increases their risk of child sex trafficking and exploitation. Any kind of abuse, instability at home. We know that immigration status is something that's often taken advantage of. Traffickers will use that against the child or their family. Any kind of instability, right? So what we all need in order to thrive in our homes and our lives is that kind of stability, whether it's a stable person, a stable place we can go to, something that we can be connected to. And when that's not there, that increases a young person's risk. And Eliza touched on also the lack of acceptance when we're talking about gender identity and sexual orientation. And that also is very much related to increased risk of youth homelessness. So we know that a very disproportionately high percentage of children who are experiencing homelessness identify as LGBTQ+. And so, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gender nonconforming. And that high number, again, puts them at risk because if they're not getting their basic needs met, if they're not in a stable home environment with stable, caring adults, then their risk of, they're going to have have to look for those needs and find ways to have those needs be met, and somebody's going to come in and take advantage of that. And then on an individual level, when we're looking at that history of trauma, traffickers are very good at both sensing it and also just gathering information. And so when they know that that somebody has experienced some type of trauma, particularly sexual trauma, they use that against them. They connect with them because now this young person has shared something very personal and has been vulnerable with this individual and trusted them, and then they twist that and they turn that around to use that against that young person in a wide variety of ways. And then I've mentioned already kind of throughout that lack of family or adult figures, remember that stability that we want, that everybody needs, that is very important. That puts a young person at very, very high risk. Because if they don't have somebody to turn to, somebody to guide them, that's going to make it much easier for another person to come in and promise to fulfill that role, and in turn be hurting that child and taking advantage of them. Of course, we also, if that young person has any kind of reliance on substance abuses, or they are in a family where that's something that they're experiencing, we know that puts them at higher risk. And then if a young person has any kind of developmental or physical disabilities, that can be really challenging because it's harder for them to recognize the signs and the red flags, and to be able to make those differentiations so that they can avoid a risky situation. So all in all, we don't have that much time to talk about prevention today, but it is my favorite thing to talk about. In order to prevent this from happening, I went through kind of a long list of risk factors. And if we want to prevent this from happening, we want to increase the protective factors around every single child. And so that includes that supportive family environment, having some boundaries, but most importantly, stable relationships and caring adults. So even if that's just one or two caring adults that are stable, that can be there for them, that can help them make sure that their basic needs are being filled, that significantly decreases a young person's risk of being sexually exploited. Because that is often the number one role that a trafficker is taking when they are taking advantage of a young person. All right, so now I'm going to pass the virtual mic to Eliza so she can talk about some indicators.
Thanks, Tina. Miss Cynthia was wonderful to share with us the great work that all of you are doing. And like Tina mentioned, while we do have quite a bit of data, 17,000 reports of child sex trafficking reported to us last year, we also think this is going to be an amazing opportunity to learn from each of you, especially in the Pacific Islands. It's a place where NCMEC could really learn a lot more about what responses to child sex trafficking and how child sex trafficking is presented. But hearing a little bit more about your professional experience and what you're doing, I think that based on what Tina already mentioned with risk factors, it's likely that you're already serving young people that meet some of those criteria or risk factors to make sure that we're taking the time to look for potential red flags of trafficking. So we have a full list of potential indicators on our website. I'm going to list a few of those for us of like, okay, now we think these kids are at risk. Here are some things we're seeing. This isn't a checklist or an assessment tool. It's an opportunity to say, you know what, this might be an opportunity to talk to this young person, ask questions, and see if maybe either child sex trafficking may be occurring, or that child's at high risk and that there's something we can address for prevention. So I think you'll see, for instance, abruptly disconnecting from friends or family isn't necessarily mean that child is being trafficked, but it's a good opportunity to ask some questions about why. Some other indicators we've been able to see through trends are secret cell phones, or if they have apps that are allowing for multiple cell phone numbers to be used. Unexplained absences from school or chronically running away. And Tina also mentioned this piece about that chronically running away. So not just I got in a fight with mom and I'm going to somebody else's home because I'm mad. When we're talking about multiple times or for extended periods of time, NCMEC is really trying to shift internally the way, just like we as a movement have been moving away and understanding more that we would never think of a child as a prostitute, whereas 12 years ago, I was working in a child prostitution court, and we're starting to understand that victimization, that running away shouldn't be a label for a child, it's a behavior. And it's something that we want to ask more questions about. Again, talking about behavior, significant changes in behavior, and really paying attention to online activity, because we are seeing an increase of children being solicited online through sextortion for commercial sexual exploitation. And unexplained access to large amounts of cash, or if they're coming and having hotel keys, how were they able to stay at a hotel? Why are they staying at a hotel? You know, opportunity to start a conversation. Tattoos is one that I think is important to be aware of, but also kids have tattoos these days. And you know, I got a tattoo when I was in high school, and I would hate for somebody to analyze it because it was a silly mistake I made. But there are indicators related to tattoos where we're seeing trends with children. So if a child has a tattoo or a branding mark that they're unwilling to explain, right? You get a tattoo, you want to tell people about it. Or if it's the same as tattoos that you've seen on other confirmed victims of child sex trafficking, or if it's saying something like the B word or indicating loyalty, money, etc. Those are sometimes, again, that could be indications that we're actually seeing those trends, that it's a way to maintain control over victims. Again, close association with an over-controlling adult. We used to say boyfriend or girlfriend here, but we updated this language as well to be more inclusive of gender and situations. More and more we're seeing kids be recruited by peers as opposed to directly by traffickers. And then also because we want to make sure that our language isn't reinforcing the idea that all perpetrators are male and all victims are female. We've had the opportunity to learn from expert consultants with lived experience that are part of our survivor expert working group, that narrowing our thinking in this kind of language, again, keeps us from asking the questions of other populations of young people who may be being exploited as well. And then finally, if they're using language that's associated with child sex trafficking, this does not mean we encourage you to use language associated with child sex trafficking, but I would give you the advice to make sure that you're familiar. If you're not sure what certain thing kids are saying means, try to find out, because that can absolutely be a really helpful way to be more aware of potential trafficking red flags. Now, we talked about the fact that our numbers are changing. The fact of the matter is, while we can give trends around the data of what is reported to us and what we're seeing, it is hard to quantify this information, because I think the number one reason that we're not getting the data on these kids is because we're just simply not identifying them. Along with indicators that are challenging, unlike our traditional cases where we have the idea that we've rescued a child, you know, they went missing and now we've rescued them. Or there was child sexual abuse material. Formerly we said child pornography, but have updated our language to say child sexual abuse material, that we've identified that kid, get them away from their abuser, we've rescued them. That language has really shifted at NCMEC when we talk about child sex trafficking, because again, as we've learned from the young people we serve, when we intervene in these cases, that doesn't feel like they're rescued. That's not the end of the story. And so that has to do with the fact that these young people have likely already experienced a lot of trauma. I don't have the time to go completely into all of the types of abuse these young people may have experienced, but it's not unlikely to have heard that either from their family or from their foster family that there's abuse that's been happening, or that you know, that after they're being exploited, that they're being charged with crimes like prostitution or related charges, where they're going to say, you know, you say you're here to help me, but I've been told again and again by the system that they were going to help me, and all I've seen is more abuse. Again, there are amazing programs out there where kids have received help and support, but the young people that we've had the opportunity to work with often don't have that same narrative, and have unfortunately experienced abuse within the systems that are supposed to be serving them. And so in some ways, they're not wanting to identify or even consider themselves a victim, because this is their survival. This is the way that they're going to maintain their own safety in their mind. And then additionally, that trafficker, to us, we know a bad thing is happening. in their mind, especially if that's a person that's related to them or taking care of them. But even if it's somebody that for the first time may have provided that child stability, love, affection, if you haven't experienced that before, even if you're not a child, you're going to have that bond where it may be really challenging to try to shift a dynamic to say, well, now we're here to help you and you should trust us. And then I think also for those of you in law enforcement or those of you who may be responding in a recovery situation, it is really, really important to remember too that that young person may be feeling a lot of shame or guilt, especially if it's a sting operation where they may be dressed to meet somebody who's about to pay to exploit them. Or they've been up all night trying to meet their quota, thinking through ways that in advance you can be prepared and work with partners so that it isn't, oh, this child's in front of me, how do I respond? But instead, if we have a situation where a child's recovered, what are we going to do immediately to say, are you hungry? Do you want to change your clothes? Making sure that the child's being met with a safety response and care from the beginning may help to navigate some of these initial barriers to identification and cooperation within a system or services. And that being said, it's really, really important, again, that if you are starting to think maybe we are seeing these cases, or maybe if I ask the question, that we think about what is our response going to be if a child discloses or if they're in front of me before they're ever there, so that you're not scrambling and that it's not one more burden on the child to figure out their next step, but that we can provide a supportive environment as soon as they are identified. So all of that's to say, with the amount of trauma a young person may have experienced in advance, with the lack of trust that may be in that situation, and I would say for me, the number one population to convince that these kids are victims of a crime are the children themselves, is that we want to maintain and remember that no matter what the facade is of the child in front of you, that we're talking to them like a child and treating them like a victim. And I have to say, and as Tina mentioned before, I'm going to be using the term victim and survivor synonymously. We want to make sure we're using language that is indicative of the type of crime that's committed, but in no way are we trying to define somebody with those labels. We want to recognize that everybody who has survived child sex trafficking or is surviving is an individual and is incredibly brave to be surviving this type of crime. But when you're talking to that young person and maybe they do run, maybe you try to help them, you're trying to work hard and they run back because of trauma bonding to a situation or involved in exploitation again, if you're having that hard time intervening, we really suggest that you start with the what questions instead of the why. In so many areas of victims of crime, we put a lot of onus on the victim before we think about the perpetrators involved. So as opposed to saying, why did you run away again? What made you want to run away again? How can we provide services, or what can we do to make you feel more safe here, to course correct some of the things those challenges that you've been experiencing? And I think for those of you who've been working in the anti-trafficking field for some time, it won't surprise you to hear that that we have found that anytime that peer or survivor services can be available in that process is incredibly helpful to that child's recovery. Oops. So I'm going to take a moment, but it's a nice opportunity. I can't see anybody or the chat, but when you just heard that, did you hear sound come through on a video?
Yes.
Let me know. Excellent, thank you.
Perfect.
So wanted to share a video because I think we can say a lot about those experiences, but as I mentioned, we do have 15 expert consultants that are part of our Survivor Expert Working Group that have really been informing and shifting and changing the narrative at NCMEC on how we're responding to child sex trafficking. So we wanted to provide an opportunity to some of those complex issues that I've rushed through to start with, hear from some of those consultants firsthand.
No, there were no services at the time for me. What I eventually did was a closed chapter in my life until I interviewed for a job as a family advocate specialist. And as I interviewed for the job, they were like, "Do you know what the job entails?" Like, "Well, yeah, I read the job description, and well, let us explain it to you." And they explained the job to me more. And as they were explaining it to me, it just opened up a whole can of worms. In the interview, I'm sitting there crying. They're looking at me like, I'm like, what is wrong with you? And as they talked to me, I explained to them what was going on. And that how it opened up for me. What I wish services would look like, basically, I wish that there was someone that was in place that would really listen, to put services in place to help someone such as myself to heal, to have a counselor in place, to have medical facilities in place. I guess the word I want to use is sponsorships. If you don't have the dollars to pay for it, someone that will sponsor to get you the particular services that you need so you can move forward.
When you left him, your problems were not solved.
No, they had just begun. They, and that was the hardest thing, because with the trafficker, I didn't have to worry about eating. I didn't have to worry about bills. I didn't have to worry about how to clothe myself. Now everything fell on me. And I think for a lot of victims, that's the scariest thing, to go from depending on someone to do things for you to have to now do them on your own. And that's one of the setbacks that stops a lot of girls from leaving, because it's just more comfortable staying somewhere where you already know what's going to happen versus going into something unseen and unforeseen. Like you don't know what tomorrow holds.
I also, feel that there's so much like anxiety that goes in regards to a young person trying to change their life. As far as like, there's so many different rules and ways and practices, and you have to act like this, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. When you already know the rules of the streets, and it's so much easier to just do what you know. It's also a lot scarier because you're telling me to trust you. I don't know who you are. I also don't know how far trust can extend. I'm gonna tell you right now, if you expect young people to be okay with changing their lives, that's a hard one to come by. It's going to be challenging. There's gonna be a lot of tears, a lot of anger, and a lot of confusion that goes into a young person's recovery. But I think that's where I look to the adults and the service providers and the people around and connected to young people.
People ask me after I speak, do you have PTSD related to your experience in Atlantic City, and how did you ever overcome that? And the awful truth is that what happened to me in Atlantic City, I felt like wasn't as bad as what happened to me after Atlantic City. I was so judged and blamed and ostracized by law enforcement, by my family, by professionals who were trying to help me, and by people in society and by my friends.
I work extra hard to break that stigma. Like I go far and beyond to prove that I'm not this person who the world has labeled me as. And that's hard for some people, because some people can't break the stigma. Some people, I don't know, it's a very hard thing to get over.
To sit with that and have patience. Patience is probably the best thing that anyone, when we talk about any silo of organization, law enforcement, anything that can be given to these young people, is during recovery, these young people need patience and they need consistency. And they need you not to fall off. This is not something, again, that's going to affect them just, the first year out of it or the second year out of it. This is something that's going to affect their lives going forward forever. How are you going to work with them, helping them recover?
And will you ever heal completely? I don't know. I really don't know if you would ever reach and say I'm completely healed, but you try at it every day and you work towards healing, and you just become a healthy person all the way around. And that's what I'm aiming for. That's all you can aim for.
So again, I think it's really important to make sure that survivor perspective is part of the conversation. That's why we included this picture as well, which is a nod to our federal partners to show that along with that, the federal government has heard this call again from child sex trafficking and human trafficking broadly. It's been such an honor and pleasure to be able to work in a movement that has been led by survivors for so long, and that making sure that they're hearing the call of nothing about us without us. So this photo is actually of professional leaders from across the country that have been appointed to be part of a federal task force on child sex trafficking, providing policy recommendations, and each of them have lived experience with human trafficking. So I think it's really important to end on, or talk when we talk about moving forward, that there are a lot of challenges, but individuals who have survived human trafficking and child sex trafficking are resilient, strong people. And there are steps we can take to support them and make sure that success happens. So I think, knowing the kids you're working with, the work you're doing, some of this isn't rocket science. Like, you're building the relationship, consistency, love with these children, supporting them and giving them opportunities and choices to make changes within their own lives is going to be one of the most important things we hear. And we're building the plane as we fly it when we look at victim services in any area, especially in an area like child sex trafficking, which is relatively a new term in the victim services field. To be able to say what we have been able to see as far as consistency from any program is hearing that a relationship is going to be key for that child to succeed, a supportive relationship with an adult. And again, to make sure that that success happens, trying to do so in a way where we're not accusing the child, but supporting them in thriving, learning what we can do to support them on a journey to empowerment. So we talked a lot of information about the what, the why, and the challenges. Wanted to reinforce, like Ms. Cynthia said, that NCMEC is here to help you. So Tina talked about at the beginning, if you don't remember anything else, 1-800-THE-LOST or cybertipline.org. Really important to reach out to us because we are here to support you. If you're in law enforcement, our child sex trafficking team is comprised of over 16 analysts that work just on child sex trafficking cases. They're going to take tips from the public, from internet service providers and others, and synthesize with open source data along with specialized databases and advanced technologies to help identify and recover and build investigations for child sex trafficking. And we're able to work on these issues 24/7. So to be able to provide support in gathering intelligence so that law enforcement can really spend the time working on the investigation has been helpful to the recovery for these teams. We also are launching a team along with support for family members. We're going to be working with service providers, particularly child welfare providers, to be thinking through that conversation. So I mentioned that it's really important before that child's in front of you to be thinking about what does a service plan look like. This month, we actually are launching and beginning to establish a team of resource specialists that are going to be proactively reaching out to social workers and children in care when we get children reported missing to NCMEC that are suspected child sex trafficking cases, to say, what is your plan when that child is recovered, and what can we do to support you in making sure a recovery plan is in place? And certainly in the areas of the Pacific Island, that's a place where we have a lot of learning to do. We're not going to pretend that we know better of what's happening on the ground in your community and what young people in your community need better than you do. So as we launch this project, we're really hoping to, again, learn from those of you on the ground doing the work. And we also are launching a training. So I'm going to go through some of these a little bit more quickly, but all of this information, along with the videos and the statistics, are available on our website. So the resources we provide, missingkids.org /CST, which is child sex trafficking. So missingkids.org /CST. We do have a full team that's also available, including peer support for parents and families. So, if my child was being trafficked, there's that own level of shame that may come to me along with the trauma I'm experiencing and isolation feeling. There are other parents and family members who've experienced their child being exploited, missing, trafficked, that are there and available to provide peer support through our services, as well as mental health professionals that are able to connect families to support services as well. So what can you do? Observe, report, and advocate. Reporting, again, cybertipline.org or 1-800-THE-LOST. Really important, especially during quarantine time. We've seen a huge amount of increase in viral content being shared. I want to just share the mantra, report it, don't share it. Sometimes that is also either spreading misinformation in some cases, or if it's information about a young person, we don't want to re-exploit them by pushing that information about their abuse all over the web. Make sure that it's coming to NCMEC, but so that we can take that information and make sure it gets back out to law enforcement. So every tip, every little bit of information that comes into NCMEC is going to be sent back out to law enforcement through our federal partners. And then again, that's not just for child sex trafficking, that is it's for missing children and for sexually exploited children. So sex extortion or sextortion, child sexual abuse material. Last year, our cyber tip line received over 18.5 million reports through our cyber tip line. All of that information can build upon us to support law enforcement in investigating these cases. We also just launched a 3-part training series on child sex trafficking. It's available on our website. So if you go to NCMEC Connect, a lot of the information that we've covered today, along with the resources, it's about an hour of content throughout 3 modules that can dig even deeper to some of the areas that we talked about, and that's open to the public. And finally, the last resource that I think is really important as we talk about the explosion of online content related to child sex trafficking and the connection to, unfortunately, children being extorted through the internet. So my picture's out there and now it's being used against me to lure me into child sex trafficking or any other type of exploitation. NCMEC actually has resources on our website about what to do if your content is out there. Including step-by-steps for websites like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, to be able to get that content down and off the website. We really want to make it a myth to say that if a content's out there, you're never getting it back. We're trying to change that narrative. So a great resource for service providers who may be working with young people who are experiencing that type of exploitation as we speak. And so I end on that note. Tina and I are going to be available to answer questions, but I know there are a lot of other important resources to be shared, so we really appreciate the time. Tina, was there anything you wanted to add?
Nope, that's it. I'm going to put Eliza's contact information and my contact information in the chat box. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all.
Thanks so much.
I know you can't hear it from your end, but there's great applause. Thanks to Eliza and to Tina for joining us today. And yes, we have quite, quite a lineup today for you with our key partners providing information from our federal agencies. And so NCMEC is one, certainly, and I can promise you with their assistance, this will not be the last time you've heard from them. You'll be hearing from them soon, and we hope to continue to provide more training in our time zone as well for you. Just wanted to let folks know we will be accessing, or I'm hoping that we'll be able to have access to their PowerPoint slides. So we'll be able to have that available to you folks on our website as well. So make sure that you check in, if not after today, by the end of the week, and we'll certainly put up additional information and resources. So we want to thank again Eliza and Tina for joining us. Thank you to NCMEC for being able to be a resource for us. Thank you. So now, folks, we have waiting in the wings other key partners too. And we want to be able to thank our partners. Let me see if I can get them on board. I can find you. There's so many folks who are standing by at Spotlight, and there's one more at Spotlight. There we go. Half a day, we want to welcome Ashley Garrett and Jenna Novak with the National Human Trafficking Training and Technical Assistance Center to be able to provide us with additional information. And of course, kudos and thanks as well to the Office on Trafficking in Persons who approved their being on our webinar today and joining us with information and resources. So I'll pass it on to you folks, and you should be able to share your slides as well.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jenna Novak, and I am the Deputy Director of the National Human Trafficking Training and Technical Assistance Center. And that is a mouthful, so from here on out, I'm going to call it NITAC. So I've been with NITAC for 3 years now. Prior to that, I was at Polaris for 6 years. And then prior to that, I was doing direct service work at a domestic violence, sexual assault, and trafficking shelter in Maryland. So I've been in the field for about 12 years now. Ashley, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Garrett. I'm the director of NITAC and the founding director. I can't even believe it, but we just started our 5th year of existence. And so that's been really exciting for us, and excited to share some of the ways that we hope to partner with you all. I also just need to do full disclosure that I am home with a 6-year-old, and it is dinner and movie time. So if something pops up like a 6-year-old's voice or head, please be patient while I juggle that. But I've been working on human trafficking issues both in the United States and internationally for about 20 years. Have done both work in implementing direct service programs, working within the criminal justice system, and now am really delighted to be part of NITAC, where we're really trying to amplify a public health approach and expand the ways in which our communities can respond to trafficking. So it's wonderful to connect with you all, and eager to get to know you.
Okay, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me a second. And I believe you all can see it now, yes? No?
Yes, we can
Yes.
see it.
Yes,
Yes.
okay, great, perfect. Okay, good. So, let me just see if I can figure out how to switch it. Yes. So, as Catherine mentioned in her opening comments, we are actually a program of the Office on Trafficking in Persons. And so through that, we do work on trafficking from a public health approach. And I'm going to break down briefly what a public health approach means. But just looking at what we do as NITAC, our commitments are to reduce the vulnerabilities of those most at risk of human trafficking, increase victim identification so that we can then work in getting them access to services, and then strengthen their short, medium, and long-term health and well-being for survivors. So in all of the work that we do and all of the resources that we put out, we're always thinking of those main commitments that is woven through everything. So what is a public health approach? Really, in the past, human trafficking has been looked at through a criminal justice point of view. And that then has influenced the field's response to what a trafficking response looks like. And so as you see on the left, a criminal justice response is one where we're responding to identified victims. So those who have said that they are victims of trafficking. And those services are often more short in duration. And they're really focused on being able to get victims and survivors to be able to work with whether that's a criminal justice side or a service provider side, to then become witnesses against their traffickers. And so it is an incredibly important perspective. However, as the field has continued to grow, we've really realized that human trafficking is also a public health issue that affects not only the individuals who are experiencing trafficking, but their families and their communities across multiple generations. And so what's exciting about this approach is that we're really looking at a prevention framework in what we're doing to try to stop trafficking before it starts, to try to decrease the duration of trafficking, identify individuals sooner, and then to make sure we're putting services in place to help them with their long-term care and well-being. So this model is really looking more at a community-based lens to try to prevent harm from originally occurring. So at NITAC, we really have 5 different foundational principles that we make sure in all of the work that we put out and all of the work that we partner with folks on the ground also doing this work is based off of. And I think one of the strongest ones is that we are inclusive of all types of human trafficking. So we are looking at both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. We're making sure that we are working with both adults and minors and working with all people on any gender spectrum. And so any kind of work that we're doing, even if somebody is specifically requesting work around sex trafficking, we're making sure to incorporate all forms of trafficking so that at least there's an understanding when we're working with professionals that are engaging and potentially interacting with individuals who may be experiencing trafficking. Another big crux of what we do is that that we're really proud of is everything that we push out is survivor informed. And so whether that is any kind of online training series that we have created, survivors have been involved from the very beginning in developing what those modules look like, in peer reviewing any of the work that we put out of our toolkits or any of the materials. And they also provide peer reviews for others in the field who are interested in taking a look at some of the materials that they're putting out, whether that is different protocols for service provision in your service agency, or any kind of response protocol in a hospital or in a school setting. And the last 3 that are important are that everything that we do is culturally and linguistically appropriate. So understanding that anyone can experience trafficking, ensuring that within language, within any kind of ability, understanding culture is incredibly important in making sure that we're training professionals on how to work with individuals who may be experiencing trafficking. We are really focused on a multidisciplinary response. So as I said, a public health response to trafficking is really community focused. And in that sense, we make sure that all types of organizations are being pulled into a response that may not be as typical on a criminal justice lens. So we work a lot on the NITAC end with healthcare providers, whether that's based in hospitals, whether that's based in community health centers, so that they are able to identify individuals or clients that they're seeing that may not be coming to them for any kind of abuse, but are coming for an injured, something that has been injured, so that there's an understanding of how they can be screening. We work a lot also with school systems to understand how to build out their approach. And so we're really kind of pulling in lots of different organizations to make sure that survivors are getting a holistic response, in addition to not just organizations, but within the larger community, within families, et cetera. So having organizations and communities be thinking about who some of those important adult mentors should be, et cetera. And then lastly, everything that we do is results driven. So we have an entire team who evaluates all of our trainings and all of our technical assistance so that we can ensure that we're continuously improving the work that we're putting out. So every year we work with the Office on Trafficking in Persons to set different priority audiences for who it is that we want to target for technical assistance, the different populations that are at risk that we should be having those target audiences be thinking about, and then priority topics and skills. And so since we really focus on providing technical assistance for professionals in this space, there's 4 main kind of categories of those that we work with. And so we're working with healthcare professionals, behavioral health professionals, public health professionals, as well as social services. And so we know that that is kind of our overarching 4 priority audiences. And then from there, we kind of further narrow in on who else we should be working with and really identify where there are some gaps, what other federal technical assistance centers are providing that technical assistance and where we can fit in to help to decrease some of those gaps. And I think, again, as Catherine had already alluded to, one thing that we really love that we're able to do from this public health lens is have a clear focus on prevention, and you can see that woven into some of our priority audiences. And so how do we do it? We really look at building the capacity of organizations and professionals on the ground. And so capacity building is defined as purposeful and external intervention. So another organization coming in to assist communities or organizations' capacity over time. And so there are 4 different stages of capacity building that we're working with in a lot of our the work that we do. So we are first providing an exploration on what the need is to change. And then we are looking to help employees or communities implement some of the needs for change through different community participation, employee participation in lots of different activities, and really getting them to think about what their strategic plan or what their action plans are in order to create that change, so that we're getting that buy-in from professionals and the community. And then from there is when we start to dig into the integration of some of those skills where they're really starting to practice it. And they're really thinking about not only how individuals within organizations or communities can respond and change those behaviors, but how we can start looking at different protocols and procedures and behavioral change that's woven through those organizations. And then lastly is ensuring that there's sustainability, and so consistent use over time of some of these new practices. So we have a lot of capacity building efforts that are woven into the work that we do. And we do that through both our technical assistance and our training. And I'm going to go into what some of that looks like and some of the services that we provide for that. But when we're thinking about technical assistance, we're really thinking about delivery that can either be at a regional level, at a community level, at an organizational level, thinking about trainings, webinars, maybe you would like a peer review of some of your program materials, or thinking about how we can start to engage survivors to help you thinking about continuously building your programs. We also have some long-term technical assistance as well. So it might be that we are connecting you to some of our consultants to share peer-to-peer learning and help you come up with some of your 5-year strategic plans. And then we also create different toolkits, literature reviews, and fact sheets that are all on our website as well that we'll walk through. And then lastly, we have some standardized training as well that we're creating in-house and pushing out into the field. So I'm going to walk you through some of those resources that we have in a bit, but I wanted to just at first share some of those definitions as we're starting to talk about them. So you can really think about the resources that NITAC provides in 3 separate buckets. The first bucket is survivor involvement, and I'm going to go into each of these, so I won't go into them deeply here, but I'll dive into that a bit more. And that's really where we're offering professional development opportunities for survivors through fellowships and scholarships. And it's also one of the skills that we are pulling into the work for priority audiences as well. Next, we have our SOAR trainings, and our SOAR trainings are part of those standardized trainings that do come, most of them do come with continuing education credits for professionals as individuals, organizations, or community members to take. And they're really tailored around some of those priority audiences that I discussed earlier. Then we have our technical assistance program that's really meant for organizations, communities on the ground who are working in the trafficking space and who have identified some kind of need or some kind of change that they need to implement in order to better work with survivors of trafficking, to better improve some of their processes or some of the skills that they have when they're interacting with clients. And so in those cases, we are providing really standardized training. So we'll have someone within our organization connect with you all to do an in-depth intake or needs assessment to identify where some areas are that we can assist, and then pull in some of our consultants who are experts in the field who have been doing this work for years to help you work through it, whether that's through webinars or longer trainings or assistance in creating materials, etc. And so further thinking about what survivor involvement is, the reason that survivor involvement is so important is because it allows organizations to better serve their clients, to improve some of their programming, and then figure out where there are some challenges and opportunities to really achieve their organization's missions. And so we can only be successful in doing that in a field if we pull in different experts to assist. And the true experts in this area are those who have experienced trafficking. And so as much as possible, we're looking to pull in survivors to help build out and improve our programming. And so understanding the degree in which your organization is survivor informed is a really critical first step in understanding how well your program is doing. And we actually, we have a toolkit that we created through one of our programs that I'll speak to in a second, that is meant for organizations to do a self-assessment and really figure out where your organization is in terms of their level of survivor involvement and survivor engagement within their organization. And then from there, it provides you with insights into how to improve, how to work with survivors to improve some of your programming. And so there's lots of information that's in that. Again, that's on our website, and I highly encourage anyone here working within an organization to take a look at that and to take that assessment. And then from there, when you're starting to identify areas for improvement, you can reach out to us. And as NITAC, we can continue to help to support you in figuring out how you want to continue to elevate your organization's programs. And so, as mentioned earlier, one of the ways that we do this is through the Human Trafficking Leadership Academy. And Catherine already mentioned that the Human Trafficking Leadership Academy is a 5 to 6 month program that really, where we pull together 6 survivors and 6 individuals who are allied professionals working in some capacity within the field. And they answer some kind of project question for us. So the current class is based on our organizations and individuals along the border, the southern border, and they're really looking at labor trafficking and migrant families and how we can look at different resources and programs to help prevent trafficking occurring within migrant families. And Ashley, if there's anything that I'm missing from that, please feel free to speak up with this current class.
No, I think one of the things I will highlight is this is our 6th class. As Catherine mentioned, the one prior was really focused in Indigenous and Native communities, in which we had a couple of different fellows that came from Pacific Islander heritage. And the idea here is not only to develop the capacity and the professional development for everyone that goes through that, but it really creates an opportunity to mimic real life, because no one works in a vacuum. And as Jenna mentioned, having individuals with expertise that includes lived experience is both vital, but can be challenging, both for individuals with the experience and those that are interested in working with them. And so we really want to bring together all those diverse lenses and perspectives and areas of expertise to have them practice in real time professional development skills that they can then take back into their communities. And we're really excited in the coming year that we're just launching a specific technical assistance initiative where we'll be reaching out to all of our fellows from the last 6 classes and sharing resources for them to partner with an organization or community to help bring to life some of those recommendations. So we've done everything from focusing in on substance use and co-occurring disorders. You saw the definition. What does it mean to be survivor informed? That is now integrated throughout many of the federal funding opportunities for services related to trafficking survivors. So there's a wealth of information and ideas that they've really generated and spend a lot of time being really diligent in. They're actually, the current class will be graduating in about a month, and I can't wait to see what they have to say next. Jenna, do you want me to keep going for you since we're going into SOAR?
If you want to go over SOAR, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So the next core area, I can't drive, I don't think, unless
Oh, right, I got it.
since it's with you, so you've just got to keep progressing. Okay, so the next, this kind of looks at an approach that we have been building when we first got started. One of the only things that existed before NITAC 5 years ago was there was a SOAR curriculum, and it was a 2 to 3 hour webinar or in-person training that was very dense and very evidence-based. But wasn't necessarily meeting the communities, individuals, and organizations where they're at. And one of the things to really change behavior and build capacity is making sure that your programming meets the needs of the people you're trying to serve. So the first one was we have a tier 1, and those are on-demand trainings that I'll talk about in a minute, but they're on demand, they're available. So if you're, if you've got an emergency room doctor in the middle of the night who's got to get through some CEs or CMEs and has their break, they can go through it. In Guam, the time difference does not matter because those are all available to you and accredited. And we have found that that accreditation is a really important aspect of the SOAR program to get people's buy-in. The second is really looking at taking an organization and transforming it from really looking at from an audit all the way through to the end, how to evaluate your programming. And we are in the midst of just preparing to do this for the first time in a fully virtual lens. We had piloted this several times, last in Nashville, Tennessee, in March of last year. In the session, we learned that Tennessee had their first COVID cases happening through the hospital association that was participating. So we've been really adapting a lot of our programming to really reflect the virtual environment that so many of us are still needing to function in. And then the third is really looking at how you can collaborate and build community. And so really taking the foundation that many communities have around a community justice response, but building on it, bringing in different people that are used to doing health outreach or used to doing a variety of other things, violence prevention work, things that they are experts in those fields and we need to be able to leverage on behalf of the individuals we're trying to serve. Next slide, please. Okay, so SOAR for individuals. So this is where we really get down to the kind of tier level. These are foundational and skills building trainings. Last year, we trained about 40,000 individuals through our SOAR for Individuals programming. We offer 10 accredited trainings that range in an hour to an hour and a half online. You can take them at any point and you get the CEs and CMEs to go with that. That has been a tremendous piece of where we have seen interest for people that are super busy, as all of us are, but some folks in particular, healthcare, behavioral health, legal entities, they have continuing education requirements that they must use to maintain their license. And so in us offering those, we reflect the principles that Jenna really discussed. So they are re-upped every year. And every year we pay to have them reaccredited and updated in content. The trafficking field is evolving rapidly. There's new research and evidence being published every day. And so we want to make sure that the training is really is based in the most current understanding of the issue. We have also seen, and I didn't get a chance to look up in Guam yet or not, but we are also seeing a trend across the United States and territories that legislators are starting to mandate at a state or regional or territory level trafficking training for different types of professionals. So some of those are law enforcement, some of those are healthcare providers. So as an example, in the state of Texas, there are about 10 million healthcare professionals that are across the state certified to deliver all sorts of types of healthcare services. All of those 10 million need to undergo human trafficking training in order to maintain their license. So we have trained in the last, I was just looking at the most recent numbers, I think in the last 4 or 5 months, we have trained 30 to 40,000 individuals just in the state of Texas. It's freely accessible. You can place it within your own systems. And we've also placed it in systems that are available and it's all set and ready. We'll be launching a new, what we call a 201 level, where we're taking to a more skills building rather than a foundational raising training levels. And those shall be rolling out in the next few months. And so we're really excited to see that. We also do offer this in person and virtually. And so if you go to our training calendar, again, with the time change, it might be a little bit tricky. We try to be, late afternoons on East Coast time to try and hit a little bit of a middle ground. But there are some of those trainings that are live as well that we do virtually. Next slide. And so, yeah, I'm aware we got to pound our way quickly through this. So for organizations, this is where we're really looking at how do we ensure that an organization from top to bottom is prepared to work with individuals who are experiencing trafficking or those at risk for it. So we walk them through a mechanism for how to establish and address all of these particular topics in their organizational programming. We bring teams of leadership from organizations together to do that. This year, we've prioritized behavioral health and social services. And so if this is something that you find would be of interest to you all, it's definitely an area where we will be doing this virtually because of the current realities for our health world and making it available. There is an application process and there needs to be some reflection of leadership buy-in to be able to implement that. And then we follow that same program on with coaching for the organization for a period of time, so they have help in implementing their actual action plan. Next slide. SOAR for Communities is really taking that community foundation approach, and we spend a lot of time working with communities to assess where are they at, what are their assets, where are their strengths. We apply a socio-ecological model in this training where we're really looking to identify the capacity that is already rooted in the community and how can that be tweaked and modified to reflect the context of human trafficking also in that community, because it does vary from location to location. And so really wanting to look at how through the training, communities develop an actual action plan that is about their prioritization of where they need to focus, where they want to focus in the coming year. And then in the aftermath, we provide individual coaching for that same community to help in following through on those action plans. This is a picture of the one we did in Spanish. It's available in Spanish and English. And we did that particular one as a group in McAllen, Texas. Next slide. Okay, so on the technical assistance front, Jenna mentioned a lot of different examples. These are a variety of them that are in here and available. I thought it might help to give some kind of a journey of a state that we have worked with for many years to give you an example of how all of this can kind of weave together. So the state of Florida reached out to us. They were interested, they had a state mandate to develop a reporting and screening protocol related to trafficking as part of their, and specifically looking more at sex trafficking as part of their Department of Health. We spent a couple of different years working with them where we matched them with a facilitator and a strategic planner to develop a strategic action plan. we delivered a specific Florida-only SOAR for organizations. We recruited individuals from Florida to participate in a Human Trafficking Leadership Academy. And they placed our SOAR online training to meet one of their statutory requirements, which is that all nurses to maintain their license as a nurse are required to undergo human trafficking training. Another great example that is still underway and is coming out is we do different convenings or listening sessions. And so one I wanted to highlight, kind of reinforcing some of what Eliza and NCMEC were sharing about a gendered nuance. We held a series of listening sessions from men and boys who had experienced trafficking of either sex or labor, or were service providers working with that specific population to identify some really specific trends and ways in which all of us can do better at serving those different populations. Jenna, do you want me to keep going, or do you want to take it back?
There's one slide left. So.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Okay.
So as Jenna said, we really look to, you can go on to the last one. We really do look to measure how are we doing our job? Are we effective at not just saying someone liked our training and it was interesting, but that they actually took that training and did something different? So in the last 3 years, we've grown from serving 5,000 people a year. Last year, we served about 50,000. And in the last 3 months, we've served over 40,000 individuals. So we have this incredible repository of information to tell us what's working and what's not that we can reflect. So a few things I wanted to highlight. These are all pieces of data that are taken after 3 to 6 months of receiving our support. So these are, and I think this is actually from our report 2 years ago. And so a few of the things I really wanted to highlight, 91% integrated victim-centered survivor-informed strategies into their identification and service programs. So they're not just, again, listening and saying, that's a great idea, but we're actually seeing them go forth and make changes to how they do that. Another great one is the 75% around change their management, leadership, or interpersonal communication style. You can't do multidisciplinary work without working with people well, and that is not always an easy thing to do. So there's a variety of these. We actually just published our first public-facing annual report last year. So I'll put that into the chat box. And I know we are just about out of time, but wanted to say thank you so much. I know we're already in conversations with Ms. Cynthia about ways that we might be able to continue to support you all. We work, certainly Catherine has already identified that supporting Guam in this journey is a priority for us, and we're really committed and excited to be able to do that. Thank you.
So if you all have any questions about any of these resources or you're having difficulty finding them on the website, the information to get in touch with NITAC is all there, and we have people who are ready to answer emails and calls from 8:30 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So for you all, it's probably best to go ahead and email, and we'll make sure that we're getting you to the appropriate resources. And if you are interested in getting some customized technical assistance or really anything that Ashley and I mentioned today, just go ahead and send that email and it will get to the appropriate person. Thank you all again. We really appreciate your time and being willing to connect with us.
Great. Thank you so much to our key partners. Thanks to Ashley Garrett and to Jana Novak for joining us from the National Human Trafficking Training and Technical Assistance Center. What a mouthful. NITAC, yes, indeed. And definitely, folks, they have been most supportive, and which also tells me, though, that perhaps if you would like more information, join us in connect with us. Your comments on your evaluation are important and valuable to us. So if there are other specific training based on the slides that they just presented that you would like us to connect with them on and provide it for future training, please let us know. Like our prior presenters, this is not the last time you're going to see of Ashley and of Jenna. We hope to see them more often. And in fact, we're looking at the next few months in providing additional training and webinars with their assistance as well. And yes, thanks for the nods. We will see more of you. So thank you so much for joining us today. And so just wanted to also now look at our partners and see who's in the wings. And we really appreciate our local service providers for standing by, ready to participate. I'm going to call on Alexander Delgado. I see you're on, and I just want to give you a moment to check in and present yourself. And let me just get situated here.
Hello, good morning. Hi, Cynthia.
Half a day.
I'm Alexander Delgado. I'm the program officer for the Trafficking Victim Assistance Program in HHS Region 9, which includes the Pacific Island territories of Guam, American Samoa, and CNMI. And Cindy, did you want me to go over the TVAP and kind of some of the how we have partnered with you and some of the other
Yes. Yes, that'll be a great introduction. And then we'll have more of you tomorrow presenting on human trafficking and the basics 101, right?
Yes, I'll also be presenting on that tomorrow on a basic human trafficking webinar on working with human trafficking victims, what is human trafficking, some of the basics for identifying victims of human trafficking. So I'm really excited to do that tomorrow.
Can I just ask Alex if you can maybe position your mic better so I can hear?
There we go. I wonder if it's all the way.
Okay, I thought it was just me.
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, great. Now we can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Yes, as I was saying, I'll be presenting tomorrow on doing a human trafficking 101 training for everyone who's interested. But to go into a little bit more detail about TVAP and the Trafficking Victim Assistance Program, which is funded by the Office on Trafficking in Persons, which I know you've heard from a few people from that office today. We're very grateful for the program, which offers assistance to foreign national victims of human trafficking. And I'm trying to share my screen, but oh, I found it. You would think after doing Zoom calls for a whole year, that would be very much more familiar with doing it. So we're working with victims of human trafficking. We're talking about sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Here are just the basic definitions, which I'll go over in more detail tomorrow. But in terms of someone who, through force, fraud, or coercion, has been forced to perform either voluntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or commercial sex act. Something, again, I'll talk more in detail tomorrow is the A&P model, the acts and means and purposes model of human trafficking, and how we come to that definition, that federal definition of human trafficking, and how we label someone a victim of human trafficking. And as I was saying, I'm the program officer for HHS Region 9, 10, and 8, which includes the Pacific Island territories. And my role is to really connect with organizations on the ground who are doing, who are service providers who are doing this work to help survivors of human trafficking and who are doing specifically case management for survivors of human trafficking. And we're kind of the in-between for the service providers that are on the ground and our federal partners, OTIP, that are more of a higher macro level, who are doing more higher level macro work. And we're here to provide a technical assistance on a more detailed case-by-case level, providing assistance with any issues that come up with any of the cases that you're working with. I myself, I'm a former case manager. I used to work with survivors of human trafficking. Some of the other people on our team, again, also have that experience. And we help you help the survivors in your community. So TWAP is specifically here to help foreign national survivors of human trafficking achieve HHS certification, which is that letter from OTIP that certifies someone as a victim of human trafficking and allows them to get public benefits to the same extent as a refugee, and to also provide trauma-informed, person-centered, comprehensive case management services, which really means, working very closely with any of the victims of human trafficking survivors, having them be the lead, the case management plan, working together side by side to make sure that you are both identifying their needs and how to achieve those goals. And when we talk about providing these comprehensive case management services, we're talking about helping really the survivor with any of the needs that are identified while you're working with them. So that could be all the things on this list, or it could be one or two, or it could be something that's not on here. But really the goal is to be able to do all around services, either through your organization or through referrals. And of course, a big part of our work is also helping the organizations that are signed up to be TWAP providers to be able to provide these services to the survivors that you all are working with. So again, the TWAP is specifically for foreign adult survivors, foreign adult and minor survivors of human trafficking who are actively seeking an eligibility letter from HHS or certification letter from HHS. So that's either through pursuing a teen on immigrant status or continued presence with through law enforcement. And unfortunately, we are not able to enroll lawful permanent residents, US citizens, asylees, and refugees. But of course, if you're an organization under TWAP, we would still assist with any of the cases that you're working with. And TWAP specifically works through a reimbursement model. So any organization that may be working with foreign national survivors of human trafficking is able to join TWAP and able to access the specific funding to help survivors of human trafficking, any of the foreign national survivors of human trafficking that you may be working with. And so we're able to reimburse you for direct client expenses and also for the case management support that you're doing, that specific administrative and that specific one-on-one work that you're doing with the survivors. This is a great program to be able to assist survivors to reach stability and reach their goals. So through the funding, you would be able to pay for housing, any educational needs, and some of our partners, for example, like Guam, the Caridat in CNMI, the Pacific Humanitarian ombudsman's poll, they are all TVAP partners, and they are able to access this funding to help their survivors of human trafficking achieve the T visa and achieve stability through these comprehensive case management services I was talking about. We are a funder of last resort, so if there is other programs that are in the community that are funded through OVC or through other ORR programs, then those programs have to be used first before TVAP can be utilized. So again, we serve all types of survivors, both labor, sex, and survivors that have experienced both types of human trafficking. This is kind of a breakdown of the survivors that have been in the program. The 68% of the survivors that are enrolled are labor trafficking, 21% are sex trafficking, and 11% have experienced both types. And same with gender. We strive to make sure that all survivors of human trafficking are being served. So we see 61% of the survivors are female, 37% are male, and 2% are transgender, genderqueer, or other gender. And our survivors come through from all over the world. So we can offer translation services, try to help you with any type of that culturally sensitive case management services, how to be able to connect with any of the survivors that you may come in contact with. So we really want to be able to make sure that all the survivors, all the foreign national survivors that are in the community are able to get assistance. So please, if at any point you may come in contact with a foreign national survivor and you want to make a referral to a TVAP partner, or if you're interested in becoming a TVAP partner yourself, these are some of the emails for some of the people on our team. I specifically cover, again, the Pacific Island territories. So you are more than welcome to email me to talk to me about how to join the TVAP program, or you can send us an email at the traffickingvictim@uscridc.org to our general email if you have any questions. I always love to talk to the providers on the ground and help in any way that I can. I don't know if we have time for questions, but that's kind of a brief overview of the program and how we specifically work with the trafficking programs in the community.
Thank you so much, Alexander, for joining us. Just wanted to add to that we are working closely with him to become the TVAP here on island. And so we are in the process, of course, being that we are not a direct service provider. We are coming up with our own protocols and policies so that we'll be the resource for those of you on island here who do provide services. So at least we can build a capacity on the island to be able to be a full-fledged service provider and for the Trafficking Victims Assistance Program. So thank you for providing the specifics to that. And I know we'll be providing more details as we begin to roll that program out here in partnership and in collaboration with our islands partners. So this is also an opportune time for the Guam Coalition to reach out to those of you here who would be interested in joining us in rolling out this project. We welcome your ideas. We want to be mindful of privacy and confidentiality issues and how we can make referrals back and forth to you to be able to provide appropriate services to those who qualify. So thank you so much, Alexander, and appreciate your time for joining us, your evening, our morning, and we will see more of you tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you. And I'm very excited to be working with you all to build capacity for the island, all the territories, which I know sometimes may feel like you have all been forgotten. But we're definitely here to work with you all.
So thank you so much. So now we have patiently waiting in the wings to our local providers, and one is with the Salvation Army. So I'm going to call on Captain Carrie Red to be on board. Half a day, Captain Red. Thank you so much for joining us. Just wanted to give a brief on her prior to going to the seminary with the Salvation Army. Captain Rudd was the banking center manager for Bank of America. After being ordained in 2010 in Southern California, she served for 3 years in Burbank, alongside her husband working with undocumented families. She and her husband then were transferred to Santa Monica for 4 years serving the homeless, then on to Seattle, Washington for 3 years working with youth and women throughout the Northwest Division. Dating back to 2015, she has worked with the illicit massage businesses, bringing in baked goods and offering up prayers to the trafficked women working inside. Captain Rudd has recently been transferred to Guam, and we certainly welcome you here. And she's been here since July 2020. Her main goal is to spread the love of Jesus Christ. Captain Rudd shows love because she and her husband love Jesus, plain and simple. So thank you so much for joining us today. So just give your brief hellos, Captain, and as I situate your video so we can show that first, and that's the plan that we have, right?
Okay, yeah. Half a day, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I am by no means an expert on human trafficking. My vantage point is really that of a pastor. And we are just about spreading love in the communities around us, whatever community we're set in. It's important that we bring the love of Jesus out to those around us. And so that's what we do.
So I've got your PowerPoint on cue. Let me just make sure that it's set. And here we go.
Seems like a legitimate place, but it is not. And it's open till 1 o'clock in the morning. I drive by and I see it open.
And then you can see in the back right there, there's these giant padlocks on the back of their doors so that you have no access from the inside of the house to get out.
It was about 4 years ago, and I was sitting in a social justice conference listening to a lady talk about her experience with the legal brothels up in Canada, and she would bring them sweets. And it was such an inspiration to me because I thought, we could do something like that. That's what we're all about. We're the Salvation Army, so let's go out there in the darker spaces and just let these folks know, hey, Jesus loves you. I realized it was time to start visiting the illicit massage businesses. We walked in and we gave them what we call sweet prayers, sweets, and we offer up prayers.
The reason why we do home baked goods is because it takes time and it's a process. In those moments are the times when it's quiet, you can pray for those people that we're going to be delivering them to.
When we bring in homemade sweets, they get so excited and they light up. It just makes their day. And then they start looking forward to it. When you think about what it is that these ladies are going through, what they have to do for a living, and their limited options, we just want them to know that somebody's in your community that, first of all, knows you're there, and secondly, cares for you and loves you. And then when they ask why, well, we're the Salvation Army, and we love Jesus, and we love you. And it's really as simple as that.
They're just so common that I think that we're used to just seeing them. So passerby might not think twice about it.
We have explicit massage businesses all over, and they're performing acts that are not legal, and they're keeping these ladies there, and they're trapped.
This is not a choice. It's not something that these people in trafficking can just stop. People that come from foreign countries, their passports are taken, their money is taken, their access to outside world is taken, and then people just say, well, just leave the business. Well, they can't. They have no resources. They have a language barrier. It is not as easy as just stepping out.
There's a website that we go to, and it is explicit, but it tells you exactly what's going on in these businesses. They will name the lady, they will name what she looks like, they will name what she does, and how much she costs. You know exactly what's going on there. So you know whether they're legal or not. Things that you want to look for. The windows are always closed. Oftentimes the ladies are dressed up. They've got hair and makeup and the whole 9 yards and the heels. There will be the front foyer. You don't actually get to walk into the parlor. And then they'll have a whole nother back space where more private things are going on.
They don't have simple things that they should have on them, like identification. They don't have the ability to take breaks from their work or don't have the ability to leave at will. Kind of basic stuff that we would say, like human rights, right? Like these are things that everyone should have access to.
Most of the time when you go in the first few times, they don't want you there. And so they're telling you, you know, the owner doesn't like it, you need to get out, just leave, they'll lock you out. We just continued to offer up prayers in multiple languages.
When we're praying for the women, like a lot of it is like, Lord, let this be something that goes beyond language barriers, because so many of them don't speak English, which we started giving out the support cards, yeah, which we got translated in Thai, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Korean. So hopefully like that is some way that they can understand a little bit more about like who we are and where we come from.
They know where our location is, they know where we're at, they have our contact information, and should they decide to leave, they have a safe place to fall.
Hello. We brought you cookies. You guys need prayer for anything today? Can I pray with you super quick? God, we just thank you and pray that you would provide for all of the needs here.
We're in the trenches and seeking out the lost and those that are sitting in the dark. We've invited the ladies to some of our events, whether it's women's ministries events, whether it's church, just letting them know that there's a connection here and that we care for them.
The fact that we remember their names, even the value of being called by name, I think made them excited to see us. They know that we know who they are and that we care for them.
One day, this lady invited us to come in the back. She wanted to show us her baby. She had a brand new baby. So then another week, we brought clothes and food. We were really happy to help as much as we could. She wants to get out of this industry. At some point, she'll know we'll be there to help her.
So many of us sit back and go, I can't do anything. And that's really where Sweet Prayers came from. This is something you can do. You don't have to be on a task force. You don't have to be part of a coalition. You don't have to know the breadth of what human trafficking is, but you can be a part of the solution. There are illicit massage businesses everywhere. Anybody can bake. Anybody can go out and extend love. Anybody can do outreach. Anyone can come and participate.
It's pretty simple, just loving someone with a cookie, but it really does work.
Even if they don't stop doing what they're doing, if they just know that somebody cares about them and loves them, and it's because they love Jesus, then we've witnessed to them.
If this video impacted you, like it and share it. We are always posting content, so don't forget to subscribe.
Hi, I'm Captain Carrie Rudd, and I'm the Corps Officer of the Salvation Army here on Guam. When we are called officers, it basically means that we're ordained ministers. And as I said before, I take the approach, it's from a pastor's vantage point. I'm in no way and by no means an expert, but rather than ignore the presence of illicit massage businesses, my husband and I were compelled to reach out to those inside the illicit massage businesses when we were in Venice, California. The Salvation Army's mission statement is clear. It's the Salvation Army, an international movement, is an evangelical part of the Universal Christian Church. Its message is based on the Bible. Its ministry is motivated by the love of God. Its mission is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and to meet human needs in his name without discrimination. Within the construct of sweet prayers, we're just about making friends within our communities, and these illicit massage businesses have become really an accepted part of our community. Whether I've been in Burbank, I've been in Santa Monica, I've been in Seattle, and now in Guam, and there continues to be a strong presence of them. In some chapters, most of the chapters, that's what we've done, just that. We've become friends of the ladies, and we've been able to make inroads with those that are in charge as well. They've allowed us to continue to come back. The ladies have invited us back to their living quarters. We have children of some of the owners that have attended our after school programs. Trust has been built, progress has been made, connections have been made. And we just simply want to pierce the darkness with the light of Jesus. Just came to realize that not everyone really sees these ladies. They're living lives that really no one would want for their own daughters. And so we're about bringing hope and friendship to them. On island, we have yet to begin. We're looking to begin with COVID and being new to Guam. We still want to make connections with law enforcement and the safe shelters. If you go to sajustice.us, you'll see that there's several Salvation Army human trafficking shelters that we work with, so that when the ladies decide to make their exit, there's a safe place for them to fall. We haven't established that yet here on island, and so we don't want to start until we have. The video itself, as you saw, covered chapters in the mainland as well as Hawaii, but we're definitely looking to start one in Guam. Genesis 1:26 says, God said, let us make humankind in our image. And for us, these ladies are someone's daughter, right? Someone's mother, sister. They're created in the image of the Creator. And it's not okay for anyone, especially within an American territory. This is modern slavery, and we believe that we're complicit if we remain silent. We believe that these ladies live under threat. We believe that there's a huge power imbalance. And that these women are treated like commodities. They've been coerced, cajoled, and manipulated into living these demeaning lifestyles. The Salvation Army has a rich, deep, long history since 1865 of being disruptors, and we will continue to do just that. We will disrupt an industry that preys on the vulnerable and the marginalized, and we will continue to combat the evil that's become so commonplace throughout our beautiful communities. I thank you for your time. Just appreciate being a part of it and learning from everyone on the panel as well.
Thank you so much for your being part of this. And that also stresses the importance of everyone, especially our faith-based organizations, to support us in preventing human trafficking on our shores. So thank you for sharing your information, and we look to collaborating more closely with you. Appreciate your being on board. So now we also have our other key partners here, another key partner that we have here on island, and many of you are very familiar with this agency. So here we have Karen Carpenter. Half a day, Karen. So just a brief on Karen. Since 2012, Karen served as the office manager at Victim Advocates Reaching Out, and she'll be sharing a few information on the background of Salvation on Victim Advocates Reaching Out. She is certainly a staunch advocate and has been a Vero volunteer since 1997, also serving on Vero's board of directors. Karen is Professor Emeritus from the University of Guam and is currently on the board of directors for Erica's House. So welcome, Karen, for joining us today. Thank you for participating in this to share about Vero. So I've got your slides on cue. Let me get that up on for you in a quick moment.
Thank you.
There we go.
Okay. Yes, we are Vero, Victim Advocates Reaching Out. Next slide. We actually were established in 1982, and we were formerly known as Counseling Advocates Reaching Out, and then later we became Victim Advocates Reaching Out. Sanctuary is older than us, but we are one of the longest nonprofits on Guam. We're not the longest, but we're up there. Next. We are a nonprofit organization. We also are trained volunteer based. We have volunteers that go through 40 hours of training with us, and they then can assist victims. One of the main ways they assist us is by helping us with our hotline on the weekends. We also have volunteers that when we could do outreach, we haven't been doing a whole lot of that lately, but that can assist. They're called support volunteers. So they can support us in outreach and fundraising activities. Okay, next. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Vero services. Vero has had human trafficking victims that we have provided services for. We don't have a lot of them, but we have had them, and the Vero services are available to them. Okay, next. So we are a 24/7 crisis intervention program for victims and survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, abuse, rape, any other violent crimes and traumatic events, which includes human trafficking. Next. We also, our services are available to family members of the victim as well as individuals who were victimized long ago and still experience emotional crisis. So sometimes we have a person who was victimized maybe several years ago, and then something has triggered it. I know one case, it was an article in the newspaper, and you know, it triggered it. They were anxious again, they were having difficulties, and so they called us just to get some emotional support. And then also, as it says, for family members of the victims, they're secondary victims oftentimes, and so we can also assist them. Next. As I said, one of the first things we do is provide emotional support. Oftentimes, whether it's a human trafficking victim or whether it's a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault, whatever it is, one of the biggest things they need is to be able to tell their story and have somebody listen that's going to believe them. That seems to be a really important part of the beginning of the healing process. And so the first thing we always do is listen. One of the biggest things. So we begin by just listening to them. And then we also provide advocacy. This is if they need additional services beyond what Vero can give them. We can advocate for those services, especially if they're having difficulty getting some maybe agency to respond or to do what they should, or you know, anything like that. We can advocate for the victim, survivor. Okay, next. Safety is the main priority for the people for Vero, for the people that we work with. And so we do safety planning, and this would be a victim of any crime, and talk to them about how they can be safe. And the safety planning depends on where they are. in their process. If they're still at home, the safety planning is a little different than if they've left the home. If they go to work, the safety planning is a little different than, so it's geared to the circumstances of the individual, but the whole purpose is the same thing. We want them to be safe. Next. We can do accompaniment. Now, during COVID-1, we have not been accompanying in person, but we've been accompanying by telephone. So if they go to the police to report, if they're at a legal office, and they need our support, all they have to do is call us and we're there with them. And soon we hope, with the lifting of restrictions, we hope to be able to go back to actually accompanying them. Many times they maybe have not dealt with the police before, they have not dealt with legal officers before, and so they're very insecure, and they just want someone with them to be that support person, to give them that emotional support that they need. And we have found, to me a little surprisingly, but even over the telephone has worked very well. They'll call us, we can be able to talk to them, talk about what's going on, what they're going through, get them kind of stabilized again so that they can deal with whichever agency they are. Thank you. Next. So we also can provide emergency shelter, emergency meals, emergency personal care kits, and again, transportation when we're not in Core 1. So very soon, I think we'll be able to provide limited transportation in 2. When we get into 3, we'll be able to get to going back to more transportation for them. But even if we can't transport them, we do a lot of transportation in that we will drive around and pick up documents for them. If they're in our shelter and their children are in school, we pick up hard copies for them. If they, just whatever they need, although we're not taking them to get it, we can go and get it for them. And again, our emergency shelter is just that, it's short term. And the whole point again is to give them a safe place to stay, to be able to stabilize them, and then to be able to get them to another program that is longer term. Next. We work very closely with community partners. And so no one agency in Guam can do everything. And so we all depend on each other for services that we do not offer. And so we make a lot of referrals. We refer for legal service. We refer for, of course, medical help. We refer for police response. We refer for just a whole myriad of things, for public health assistance, for the list just goes on, to healing hearts, and so we're very familiar with the various resources on Guam, and the big thing is knowing how our client can access those services so that we can help them, especially during COVID. We tried really hard to keep up on how they can access services because we didn't want our clients to, they've had enough barriers in their lives. We don't want them to call someone and then find out there's another barrier there. So we've tried really hard to stay up to date on all of the services and how they can be accessed. Next. We can assist victims and survivors in filling out things like the Pro Se Protective Form. This is if legal services are not able to assist them with a protective order because of conflicts, then we can assist them in filling out that Pro Se Protective Form and can get it for them to the courts. If we're in COVID-1 and they can't do that themselves. We can also assist them with filling out other forms like the GURA form or for Salvation Army or CSS Rapid Rehousing. Or again, just a myriad of things, food stamp forms, any of the forms that they need to fill out, we can assist them with that if they don't understand it, if they don't know how to fill it out, if they, so that they again can get the services that they need. Next. So we have a 24-hour hotline, and it's 477-5552. It is answered any time of the day or night. And so people can call and they will be able to talk to a person and again, be able to tell us what they want. All of our services are client-centered. And so the client decides what services they want. We will explain our services to them, tell them what we're able to offer. We'll tell them what we're able to connect them to in the community. And then they're the ones, though, that decide what services they want. And again, what services they want to connect to in the community. A lot of this is done over our hotline. They can call us directly, and many, many do, at 477-5552. Sometimes other service providers call us on the hotline for clients. We always try to be able to speak to the client directly because they're the only one that knows their story, and really they're the only one that knows what they want. And so it's really important for us to be able to connect to that client directly. Our email is veroguam1@yahoo.com. We have a website there. We're on Facebook and we're on Instagram. We do not provide services over Facebook or our website because of confidentiality, but we do have clients who contact us over our various forums. And what we will do is request, if at all possible, that they call us on our hotline so that we can talk to them directly and again find out exactly what they need and be able to go forward then. So those are Vero's services. Again, for human trafficking victims, they're pretty much the same. Some of the human trafficking cases we dealt with, we've also worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office and Homeland Security to assist victims that they needed shelter for on a short-term basis. And then we've had a few human trafficking victims that just called us directly, and we were able to assist them. So that's it, unless there's questions. Thank you very much.
Actually, there is a question, Karen, from from the Q&A chat. It's asking, how is Vero funded? Grants from GovGuam or grants from a federal government resource?
Okay, yes, we receive no funding from the local government. We have federal grants, and then we also have donations from the community. And then when we're not in COVID, we have fundraisers. Unfortunately, this year we didn't get to have our duck race, but hopefully next year. So those are really the main sources of funding. As everybody knows, Guam community is very generous. And so we've been very lucky to have some corporate people that continue to donate to us. We've been very lucky and honored to be able to get some federal grants. We have the STOP grant, we have the VOCA grant, we've had a small public health grant, and we have a small grant that is actually from Catholic Social Services, but originates from GURA. And we may be getting another small GURA grant. So, like all nonprofits, you take everything you get, you piece it together, and you hope you have 100% when you're done.
Right. So thank you so much, Karen, for joining us. And if anyone else has any questions, you can post them in the chat. We have copies of the PowerPoint presentations on our website. We do have, we want to thank you, Karen, for joining us again. And we do have one more group with us. And I just want to introduce them. I know they have lots to share, and they will also be presenting tomorrow. So if I can call on our partners from American Samoa, if I can find you, there you are. Okay, now where are you?
Talofa. Hi, Cynthia. It's Jennifer. I'm trying to figure out how to take, oh, there goes. It's myself and Judy.
Sorry, trying to get everything going here. Hi, Guam. Hi, Cynthia.
Hafaday.
Hafaday. Talofa. Can you hear me?
Yes. So I know you will be presenting tomorrow. So just wanted to ask you to give us a brief on what you'll be presenting on. And then, of course, share with us then briefly what you will be able to provide as well by way of services there in American Samoa, because we are looking at services in the region, and we have expanded all the way across the ocean to American Samoa. So I will leave it to Jennifer Tofaiono. She's the director for the American Samoa Alliance Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. And we have with her Judy Matautea, also from the American Samoa Alliance. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I like Cynthia said, I am the executive director here for the Alliance, which is a sister coalition to Guam. We are federally funded. And as the executive director, it's really my job to support Judy, who is our training coordinator. So I'm here in form of support. So I'm going to let Judy go ahead and do her thing, and I will go ahead and add or be a part of it or enjoy it. So I'll let you go, Judy.
All right. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cynthia, for having us, and the Guam team for having us. So I know we only have 30 minutes. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good day to everyone out there who's able to listen in wherever you're listening in from. I'm Judy Matautea, the training coordinator for the American Samoa Alliance Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. So today we're just going to briefly go over what we're going to be presenting tomorrow. But before we do, we just wanted to talk a little bit about the Alliance and some of its work here in the territory. So we're the dual designated coalition for the territory of American Samoa. And our vision here is that, so the vision of the Alliance is that we're able to live in an American Samoa where individuals live free of violence, with equality, dignity, and respect. And the impact of this is that live free of violence, the cause, equality, dignity, and respect. And of course, the action is be free of violence. And so our mission as well is empowering individuals and communities in American Samoa through collaboration, promotion, resiliency, and strengthening capacity to eliminate domestic and sexual violence. The cause is empowering American Samoa individuals and communities, and the action is to empower, collaborate, promoting resiliency, and strengthening capacity. And the impact, hopefully, is to eliminate domestic and sexual violence. Can we have our next slide, please?
Oh gosh, let me cue it in. Sorry, I'm just.
No worries, no worries.
Okay. And I think I just wanted to add on to what Judy had said about collaborations. We are, it's important that we provide service and TA to our service providers. When I say service, I mean that we help them to come up with protocols, policies, with support their activities that they do to ensure that victims of domestic and sexual violence, dating, violence, stalking, that they are all safe. So this is a big part of what we do for the Alliance. And since Cynthia has our slide up, I'll go ahead and let her go.
Okay, so this is what we're going to be sharing. What we're going to be talking mostly about tomorrow is the Samoa, or the Samoan way, and the framework of human trafficking within our territory, to social justice and human trafficking within the territory through the lens of a victim here in American Samoa. And then, of course, becoming agents of change within our community to fight human trafficking here. So these are some of the stuff that we want to share with you, and we'll go into depth with that tomorrow when we're able to meet here again. Next slide.
I wait. Hold on a second. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Can you go back to that slide? Sorry. So what I wanted to share on this particular photo is this is one of our partners, and it was a faith-based group. And they had introduced, they came in and they talked with us and they said, hey, we want to do this activity through A21. Was that correct, Judy?
Mm-hmm.
And it was to talk
A21.
about human trafficking. And so these are women that are part of that faith-based group. And so we participated. That was the first time that we participated in this walk that they had with A21. And it was very interesting. It was very new to the territory. And so it really helped to bring put a spotlight onto human trafficking, a westernized human trafficking.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and we've been, the Alliance has been big supporters of having the A21 worldwide walk here in the territory. And since they've done it, and I think they've done it like 3 or 4 times now. So they've done it within 3 to 4 years. And the Alliance has been their biggest supporter on having this A21 walk. And for those of you who know who A21 is, that's eliminating violence within the 21st century. And they have this annual walk that they do all together worldwide. So when we're walking here in American Samoa, we also realize that there are other people on the other side of the world that are walking at the same time as we are for the same causes. Yes. So yeah. Next slide, please.
So this is an important part because everything that we do here in American Samoa, when we talk about social justice issues or oppression or things that cause violence that are systemic supports systems of oppression and things that create violence in our community, we have to take a cultural lens to it because we are Samoan, and 95% of our population is Samoan. We speak our language. We have a different connection with the United States of America. We are a territory, and similar to Guam, I think, who's an unorganized territory. Our unorganization allows us to keep and hold our communal lands. And this is really important to us because our lands connect us to who we are and our family. So this slide here is just to give a cultural lens about the fact that as an individual, we're very collectivist, we're very communal as everything is done for the benefit of the family. And you would think that that would be a very great system because then if everybody benefits, then everything would be okay and there'd be some social justice or there'd be justice within everything. But unfortunately, within that traditional setting, we also have hierarchies. And one of them is the Matai system. And the Matai system creates these hierarchies and only men can be on the village settings. They are also decision makers. So these are the things, the impacts that we have when we have to talk about violence and what perpetuates the violence and what supports violence in our cultural lens. And although we are listed as collectivists and things that you would think would make us strong as far as social justice issues, it becomes very confusing. So we have to take it from a cultural lens that reminds us that yes, we are part of a family and that we are individually identified as a family and our community and our village and where we are, and that's your essence of belonging. But we also have to then bring in that other side of westernized thought of individuality and how that can also help to change the impact or change the way that people address violence. So unless Judy, you have anything else to add to that?
No.
And we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Yes,
So
yes, tomorrow. We'll go into depth for that tomorrow. Next slide, please.
The purpose of this slide here is also to support like what a village is. So the picture on the left with the thatched huts, that's a picture from the 1930s, and that shows how connected and close the village setting is. So each hut, it has a family unit, and it could be your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, and so it's very connected. Now, the picture on the right is what we see today. And these are these expanded villages that now have generations of families. And if you are in a village in American Samoa, you can identify your family based on where your village, your hut was when you were little. So, like on the right side, it would be it would be the Smiths. On the left side, it would be the Jones. On the middle side, you'd have the Hatfields, or the upper mountain, the McCoys. But it goes on to explain that our connectiveness to the land, to where we place ourselves, it is all part of who we are. And that's important when we start to talk about how things happen in a village.
I just wanted to add on that when you look at those, we're no different from many of the other Pacific nations within the South Pacific. And when you look at those huts, it really is one extended family, like every, and it's the same thing today. The houses might look different. You might not see any more huts, but it's still the same settings with the Samoan families, you know. They all live together. And therefore, and not to take it away, but, and therefore we also have to look deep into the domestic violence law within our territory, because it really speaks of that setting. It actually says of someone that's being assaulted within that household. So when we look at if you're not within that same household, you know, it's really difficult to try and work around when it comes to that Samoan setting, because you, like for instance, the picture on the left, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's about like 6 huts there. That's like all in one family. That's all in one family. And when you look to the right, whoever owns these huts can probably still identify where, if that's the same place.
Yes.
The houses will be different, but it'll still be the same setting. Like there'll be like 6 different houses around that same area, or even more, you know. But that's how our families are set up here in Samoa. We basically live right next to each other. It's very different from the setting away from us in like in the mainland or so, where you're living in another state, or you have to travel so many miles to see families. So yeah, I just wanted to share that about our Samoan setting. Sorry.
Well, and then one more thing as well, as when we talk about, you know, more so tomorrow we'll go into depth about it, but for American Samoans, we have another island that's just 30 minutes away by airplane, and they are the same culture, same family lineage, same ties, and the same practices, and they are Samoa. And so when they come here and they move to the States, to American Samoa to get a better life, and we've allowed them to come, you know, my first cousin from the other island, I bring him to my house, I bring him to my village, he stays with me in my house. There's a whole different process when we bring that, and when we introduce our brethren from across the way, and when we do it in a way that is Samoan. A lot of times when you identify it, the practices can be considered human trafficking. When we bring them over from independent Samoa, we require their passports, we require their documents, and they stay with us. They have to stay within the village. And when you hold those documents in the definition of human trafficking, which we'll go over more, that causes this gray line where the culture and the federal definition of human trafficking become really hard to differentiate.
Yes. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is human trafficking information that we've learned from the information we have. So we'll just briefly go over this, but we can go into more into this tomorrow. Human trafficking forcefully exploits women, men, and children. It affects every country, rarely talked about. Same here. Involves transporting someone into a situation.
No, I just finished, man.
And 20 million and 40 million people in modern slavery today. Only 0.4% survivors are identified. And this is a reference from DoSomething.org. Did you want to add on anything to this, Jennifer?
No, thank you.
Okay, so we'll discuss more on this tomorrow. Next slide, please. Okay. What we learn about human trafficking through a social justice lens. So this is also, we'll go into more on this tomorrow, but just to briefly go over it, this is what we're going to be discussing tomorrow. Social justice curriculum used for sensitive topics. Using a social justice lens helps us to create changes of beliefs and behaviors. Persons who fall victim to trafficking are not random. Sets of conditions, destruction of local economies, where vulnerable people immigrate in search of a better life, fall prey to traffickers. And American Samoan culture and mix of vulnerability meet the definition. So we can, we'll discuss more on this tomorrow. Was there anything you wanted to add to this, Jennifer?
I think it really starts to talk about definitely how the Samoa and that we recognize these social justice issues and the sensitive topics about gender and economic and race that happened during human trafficking. So definitely you'll be able to explain it more in detail tomorrow.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we put this up here as Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act of 2000, TVPA, and this is the information that's on there. We wanted you to be able to look at that, which is something we're also going to talk more about tomorrow. So it has their human trafficking legislative definition, labor trafficking, and sex trafficking. Next slide, please. And then we just wanted to compare that to the American Samoa Anti-Human Trafficking Bill signed in 2014, not too long ago, which we'll also discuss more on tomorrow. And that is going to be on how the bill was introduced in 2014, because it impacts our families. And the two main provisions: Public Safety Department shall receive mandatory training on human trafficking for all law enforcement and emergency first responders. And then there's the territory-wide task force under Governor's Office and headed by ASDHS, which is the American Samoan Department of Homeland Security. Sorry. So we'll be able to touch more on that tomorrow. And then there's this, the data on human trafficking in American Samoa.
I think what's interesting on these is that there's been limited reporting. Even though we hear stories in the island about trafficking and things that, and people are just not reporting, and we try to identify why. And we work with Department of Homeland Security, and we sit on the as the Alliance, we sit on the task force, and we have these discussions, and the discussions always come back to the much more the trafficking that happens culturally, and the idea that many people don't understand what trafficking is when they make people work at slave wages and do not give them their passports, force them to stay there, and all in the guise of it's our culture. So these are interesting things.
Mm-hmm. So we'll discuss more on that. I just wanted to add on, I also do just wanted to quickly add on, I also do a radio show on one of our local radio stations. And this morning was one of those mornings where we did the radio show. And throughout this month of January, we're discussing human trafficking within our territory. And it's amazing how many people call in not knowing, not being able to identify what human trafficking is before tuning in to the radio show. They've just come to realize what they've seen, that it's happening within families, within villages. And as Jennifer was saying, as a culture, as a people, we don't know that this is human trafficking. Hence our law just came out in 2014. And it's and within our community, it's still a big part of the work to get that information out there for our people to understand what human trafficking looks like, especially through our lens as Samoans. So next slide, please. Sorry. Okay, so these are some of the human trafficking cases we've had in the past. Sorry, go back. Thank you. So these are some of the human trafficking cases we've had in the past here within the territory. 2005, we had the Davusa Garment Factory. 2008, Chinese national sentence for sex trafficking charges in American Samoa. And then in 2013, one of those that was convicted for human trafficking was that name mentioned there, Hanipale Malai. And we've included there some of those newspaper clips from those cases. Most victims are, yeah. So we're going to discuss more on those cases tomorrow. The first one, I just wanted to say the first one, 2005, the Davusa Garment Factory. For those of you that are listening in today, I don't know if anyone has ever come across information on this case, or has anyone heard of this before? Sorry, but this was a major case. This was one of the biggest cases that that really put us on the map. Unfortunately, yeah, it's not. So, yeah,
unfortunately.
Sorry. Next slide, please. Okay, so our cultural vulnerability to trafficking, and it's we've got there familial ties, immigration sponsorship, gender-based violence, and limited anti-trafficking efforts. Those are some of the points under cultural vulnerability to trafficking that we want to discuss more on tomorrow. Did you want to add on to any of those, Jennifer? Sorry.
Yeah. This all comes back to our lens. I'll let Judy be careful. No. This all comes back to that lens that we're talking about, how Samoans view what they consider just having their family over from the other islands, the familial ties that allow them to come here, the immigration sponsorship that's required to have them stay here, and the fact that as an unorganized unorganized territory, that we can control our lands and who comes in and who's not allowed in, and we can allow them to come in without very small immigration requirements, unlike if you were going from Mexico to the States or from a different country to the United States. Here in American Samoa, as long as our immigration customs allows for them to come in, there's all they need is a sponsor. And the sponsors have to be born here in American Samoa. They have to be American Samoan citizens, or residents, I should say, residents. And so there's a lot of gender-based violence that happens when they're in living with their family in these sponsorships that are very, very similar, that would meet the requirements or the definitions of anti-trafficking or human trafficking laws. But here in American Samoa, there's very limited efforts on it because of the fact that it's cultural, and they see it as, well, that's the requirement of sponsorship, or that's what we have to do. They're our family. They come here. We're responsible for them. And if they do anything here, their bills, their crimes are mine. So therefore, they have to stay with me. I took their passport away from them because they will be a problem. But yet, when you look at the definition for human trafficking, anything that holds their possessions keeps them as a prisoner. And so it's very difficult when you're having these conversations of how do you apply human trafficking to a Samoan cultural community.
I just wanted to add on that what Jennifer was talking about with immigration sponsorship, it holds a lot of power, and it is a contributing factor to human trafficking, the human trafficking problem here in American Samoa. Like any other nation, those that are mostly are victims of human trafficking are immigrants, and it's no different here with American Samoa. Those that migrate to the territory, you cannot enter the territory of American Samoa without being sponsored by someone from here in American Samoa, or a corporation, or an organization or a business here within the territory. So, and there's a lot of responsibilities that a sponsor has. And a lot of these sponsors will bring people, and then the people that they bring over will not live with them. They'll either live with someone else, and and problems start from there. And that's what Jennifer was also mentioning with some. They will take away their documents, their legal and important documents, and they will make sure that these people don't cause any problems by containing them. So this is some of the issues we're going to discuss more on tomorrow. Next slide, please. And this is our last slide because we're out of time. But we're going to go more into that tomorrow, is strengthening our approach in trying to eliminate human trafficking and supporting victims of human trafficking here within the territory. So there's going to be like safe discussions addressing our Samoan way or belief systems and human trafficking lens, how it's a hidden crime, working with the current legislative task force to develop policies and improve collaboration, defining how the community gets trained, getting the word out there into the community, and advocacy, providing the information for services available. So we're going to go more deep into those tomorrow as we come again tomorrow, and hopefully be able to see you guys again tomorrow. Was there anything you wanted to add on to this, Jennifer, before we end? Finish?
Thank you.
So so that's it for us, the American Samoa Alliance Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. We thank you for listening in. We thank you for taking your time to enable us to share some of this information about us. And we promise you that tomorrow we'll be able to share much more information on human trafficking within our territory and the work here with the Alliance. Thank you. Thank you, Guam. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate our attendees who stayed on to hear more of what you have to share as well. And they will no doubt look forward to hearing more from you tomorrow at 9 a.m. We'll start. Thank you so much. And we want to be able to also, if you have any last minute questions in the chat, please be able to post that too. And this was also more of a teaser for you all, and just wanted to make sure that you have a sense that we do have our partners from across the ways who are joining with us as well in this effort. We look forward to hearing more from Pohnpei, from Chuuk as well, and to our partners in Saipan. Thank you for staying with us until close to the lunchtime hour. So we look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow. And of course, we hope that you will also join us in this effort to prevent human trafficking on our shores. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.